This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto has power of an unknown devil fruit. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now, wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Samurai and ninja clans battled for control of the island nation long before the elemental nations were established. The friend you laughed with over a fire last week might have been the man your sword was running through that week. Alliances were formed and broken with the changing of the seasons. Their own land, marked out with steel and blood, was ruled by lords. Family and your own prowess with weapons and fists were the only things you could trust. Up until the day that she altered the regulations, this was the way the nation operated. With the help of the gods, a woman from an unidentified place with no affiliations materialized. She quickly seized power over the region, and armies surrendered to her power one by one, unable to even challenge her shape. She didn't tell her most devoted followers the source of her power until she had brought the country together under one banner and one god, herself. Deep within a forest, there was a divine tree whose fruit, if consumed, would grant one extraordinary power. The woman's authority came from these sacred fruits, and she permitted her most devoted followers to select one and use it to govern a section of her territory. However, the woman failed to take into consideration the ambition and greed of her supporters. They knew she was mortal now that they understood the source of her power. Gathering their most devoted followers, the fruit eaters sneaked out to the divine tree and consumed a number of the fruits. The period of peace was over, and wars resumed. However, this time, soldiers used strange and inhuman powers against the populace, which was powerless to stop them. The woman, horrified by the effects of her gifts, removed her two young sons and hid inside the trunk of the divine tree, which was now bare of branches. She taught her sons the way of the sages there while raising them in secret. The woman brought her two sons back into the world after they reached adulthood with the intention of obtaining every fruit. Only then did they discover the terrible reality. The fruit was a deception by the devil himself, not a favor bestowed upon humanity by the gods. Envy and greed for the fruit's power caused wars to turn violent and bloody. Friends would approach each other to stab each other in the back over even the most absurd and strange fruit ability. Sister would murder mother, and brother would turn on brother. When they attempted to eat a second fruit, those who were overly greedy suffered and were internally destroyed. The ability to swim in the salt water that surrounded them all was taken away from those who attempted to flee the continent to live somewhere else. With the fruit eaters wreaking havoc across the continent, the situation had gotten worse. With the assistance of her sons, the woman took responsibility for her errors and journeyed across the country to put them under heel once more. The two boys were able to compete with the fruit eaters despite not having consumed any of the so-called devil fruits. They started sharing their knowledge and strength with the oppressed and gave hope to those who had lost all hope. Unfortunately, their mother had made the same error. War was transformed once more because they could now defend themselves against the fruit eaters. When fruit eaters lost their power, the ancient ninja techniques reappeared. In the hopes that their vision of peace could become a reality in a world obsessed with war, the woman and her sons parted ways and kept traveling the world, trying to change their ways. The mother and her sons eventually passed away before realizing their aspirations. The ongoing conflict between the ninja clans persisted for many years until one man made the decision to alter it. Unknowingly, a boy from one ninja clan met a boy from his rival clan. Without ever knowing each other's secrets, the two quickly became friends. Both of them developed into powerful devil fruit users and clan leaders. The two young men then came together to create Konoha, the first hidden ninja village, after deciding they no longer wanted to live the nomadic and brief lives of ninja clans. With their unique fighting style and devil fruits, they attracted other strong clans, and soon after, other clans realized how powerful they were and started to imitate them. The remaining four of the five great ninja villages were formed by Kiri, Suna, Kumo, and Iwa. In order to protect their territories and handle the more routine duties of leadership, the villages quickly established a government and a nation. The ninja villages, which were composed of multiple strong clans, were now well known. The village leaders convened a summit to discuss terms in order to avoid conflict. The leaders turned into the five Kage, who used the power of their devil fruits to rule their territories and avert war. The Logia fruit shielded the eater from almost all harm and allowed the user to become one with an element. In light of this, the villages used their Logia fruits to restrain one another. Though not as significant as the Logia fruits, the other fruit varieties also had roles to play. Eventually, a village's power was determined by the devil fruits it owned, and numerous battles and acts of sabotage were carried out to obtain the upper hand. The creation of the villages put an end to one ninja war, but two more ensued. Devil fruits were traded, and the most well-known devil fruits were discovered. as well as their weaknesses and strengths, were taken advantage of. Although the elemental nations were now aware of peace, there were still a lot of tensions beneath the surface, and the ninja world is a dangerous and deceptive place. The Konoha early in the morning, a figure dressed in orange and blue leapt as silently as possible from rooftop to rooftop at high speeds. Fearfully, he kept looking over his shoulder to see if he was still being followed, and he frantically ran behind anything that could provide cover. Naruto. He was. Naruto looked around, saw a familiar face, and threw a smoke bomb to hide his identity. He scurried down from the roof and landed in front of a pale-skinned boy with dark hair and matching eyes. Saying, "Sasuke, you've got to help me, Dadbayo." Naruto grabbed his friend's shirt and pulled him into an alley nearby. After removing Naruto's hands from his shirt, Sasuke regarded him with admiration. Naruto appeared to have just rolled out of bed, in contrast to his own appearance, which consisted of a blue shirt, white shorts, and black sandals. He wore only a well-worn blue shirt and orange shorts with a toad pattern, which Sasuke doubted Naruto would ever wear in public normally. His strange brown sleeping cap covered his spiky blonde hair. This time, he must have made a huge mistake. "What did you do?" Nervously, Naruto's blue eyes peered over Sasuke's shoulder for any indication of his assailant. When he realized she hadn't followed him into the alley, he let out a mental sigh of relief. Naruto halted his nervous rambling and squeaked when he noticed a chain spike into the building above him. "I was supposed to practice examining objects for importance and then putting everything I touched back into place just as I found it, so I put a bunch of black hair dye into our shampoo bottle last night, but Dad got called into the office early this morning and Mom was the first to shower so." His mother stood on the roof where his smoke bomb had detonated and yelled, "Naruto, come out here so I can give you a piece of my mind, Dadabane." The three thin, symmetrical scars on Naruto's cheeks stretched as he winced. Her verbal tics were coming out, man. He was completely screwed. "What do I do? I've been trying to shake her all morning and she's just gotten closer. The caltrops I dropped earlier did nothing and I just used my last smoke bomb, Dadbayo." Sasuke was astute. He turned back to his best friend. He was regarded as their generation's genius. He ought to know what he should do. Sasuke was trying to decide what to do. On the one hand, he ought to try to assist him in this dangerous circumstance because Naruto was his best friend. However, he didn't want to stand in the way of Kushina and Naruto after the latter tampered with her hair, and his mother's verbal tics were manifesting. The last time someone did that, Kushina had to be restrained by the Anbu. Before sharing his brilliant idea, Sasuke placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder and said, "I suggest running to your dad. He'll probably know how to calm her down. I was hoping that you'd go grab Itachi and he'd hide me with his illusions. He's on a mission, and what about yours? I need to conserve as much as I can." Naruto shrugged. "It takes too much time to set them up and too much energy to maintain them on the run." Naruto yipped in fear as a spiked chain tip impaled itself in front of the alley. He shouted, "Gotta go Sasuke," in an incomprehensible jumble before running out the back of the alley. Sasuke turned around and caught a clear view of Naruto's assailant when he heard someone landing. Although he had seen Kushina many times in the village and at his and Naruto's homes, this was undoubtedly a fresh picture of her. She still looked like a young, attractive woman with a trim figure even in her mid-30s. Something that was easily discernible from her present clothing. The only things covering her pale skin were a few drops of water and a dark towel held up with thin chains at the shoulders and another chain acting as a belt around her waist, suggesting that she had discovered Naruto's prank shortly after getting out of the shower. Her long, typically red hair was dyed the same shade of black as Sasuke's. When her violet eyes met his black ones, the preteen let out an audible gulp. In stark contrast to her previous angry yells, Kushina said, "Good morning, Sasuke-kun," in a normal, calm voice. "Did you happen to see Naruto around here recently?" she asked. Now, Sasuke had originally intended to do his friend a favor by stalling or pointing Kushina in the wrong direction, but he quickly abandoned that plan after getting this close to her and sensing the murderous intent she was giving off. He simply had to take his punishment like a man because Naruto was an old boy. Down the alley and take a right. He's probably heading for the Hokage Tower. "Thank you, Sasuke-kun. Tell Mikoto I said hi." "Yes, Kushina-san." Sasuke nodded obediently. He then watched in silence as Kushina bounded out of the alley's rear and let out a cry of victory at having found her prey, which was followed by a far-off cry of terror from the same prey. She threw herself across the village by pulling on the chains that sprang from her hands. After shaking his head and leaving the alley from the opposite direction, Sasuke returned to his previous activity. He sensed that today he was going to execute that fireball shuriken move. Tower of Hokage. At his desk in the Hokage Tower sat a man with slightly tanned skin, blue eyes, and spiky blonde hair with two sideburns framing his handsome face and covering his blue forehead protector. He had an excellent view of the village he ruled from the large, one-way window behind him. In order to select their three-man teams, he was now reviewing the profiles of the academy students who had passed the test. The children of the different non-shinobi residents of Konoha who were merely finishing their necessary education and training comprised the remaining teams, of which only 1/3 were to truly develop into genin cells. In order to dispel any hopes of becoming a true shinobi, those were supposed to take the traditional test and then fail it. In addition to the obvious requirement that devil fruit eaters become genin regardless of their test results, only the civilian kids who demonstrated promise in the classroom would be placed on teams with other students who were virtually certain to become genin. No matter how absurd they appeared, devil fruit abilities were not to be wasted. Minato. Sensei, there's a police report that you should read, his secretary said as she knocked on his door, grabbing his attention. Put it in my inbox, Rin, I'll get to it when I have the time, he called back, still searching through his personal files. He was reading about the devil fruit he had while riding an Inuzuka boy. The abilities of each distinct fruit still needed to be taken into account, even if the entire clan only used the Inu no Mi zone fruits. Actually, the officer that dropped it off said that Captain Fugaku insisted that you read it right away. He's not allowed to leave until you do. Setting the file aside, Minato repositioned his green flak jacket, which was his standard issue, over his short-sleeved white haori. Making the officer wait around indefinitely was pointless. Minato motioned for him to open the door after an Enbu agent on duty verified that it was safe. Rin, a young woman with brown eyes and shoulder-length brown hair, purple rectangular markings on her cheeks, a pink shirt underneath a maroon vest, black shorts, and black sandals, entered. The policeman was still outside. When Rin handed the report to Minato, he glanced at it quickly, then took a moment to think and read it again. Rin, this isn't some elaborate prank my son cooked up with Obito, is it? Minato asked in a slightly pleading tone as he covered his face with his hand and gestured behind him. No, Obito is on his way back from a mission right now and your wife is chasing your son around in a bath towel all over the village right now, she stated. She continued, if you turn around you'll probably catch a glimpse of them. The officer said that they were moving across the rooftops. Minato groaned as he rubbed at a headache that had not been there 30 seconds before. Perhaps he could act as though he was unaware of it if he didn't turn around. Who was he to make fun of? By now, everyone in the village was aware of it. He would be a Hokage if he chose to ignore every challenging issue that arose. Do we know why Kushina is chasing Naruto around in a towel? He dyed her hair black. How black? Minato asked as she sat up startled. Uchiha black. With a frog-like groan, Minato said, oh, wow. Naruto really fucked up this time. Indeed, Rin shuddered in agreement. She had witnessed the incident when a Would-Be assassin had severed a significant section of Kushina's red hair on one side, and she was aware of the pride Kushina took in it. Before being questioned, the poor man had to visit the hospital. Minato rose from his chair and went to the window. I'd better go rescue Naruto before his mother throttles him. Send a message to Fugaku that I'm handling it, Minato instructed. He cracked open the window and vanished in a burst of yellow light. The academy room, a teacher sat at his desk and cleared his personal belongings out while sporting the traditional Konoha uniform, which consists of a dark blue long-sleeved shirt and matching pants, a green flak jacket, and a blue forehead protector. He had dark eyes, a scar across his nose, and brown hair pulled back in a loose, spiky ponytail. With a sigh of relief, the man reclined in his seat. Even though he loved teaching, it was always pleasant to have his students graduate and be able to unwind for a few weeks before the next group arrived. He only needed to inform them of their team assignments for tomorrow, after which he would be finished. He wouldn't have to worry about establishing the target range for shuriken practice or grading papers, so he could finally sleep in. The thought of his former students made him laugh. This year, they were definitely a funny bunch. The year was undoubtedly interesting because it appeared that a child from each of the major clans was enrolled at the same time. He grimaced and ran a hand through his hair. The Namikaze child in particular. He was undoubtedly a wild one for the Hokage's son. Above average talent, decent grades, and the worst prankster he'd ever seen. From the traditional ones to a few rather clever ones that the boy came up with on his own, Naruto did it all. Caltrops on his chair, buckets of water over the door, and scrolls glued shut. They were ultimately included in Iruka's trapping and stealth scores. He couldn't understand how he continued to enter the academy covertly without anyone noticing. He would no longer have to put up with Naruto's antics, at least. Thunk. Thunk. The noise startled the teacher, who was already holding a pair of shuriken in his off hand. A pair of kunai were embedded in his classroom window. Before he could look into it more, a boy with blonde hair rolled into his room after hitting the weak glass with a dropkick. "Naruto!" he exclaimed, startled. Naruto waved to him and said, "Hey, Iruka. Sensei. Quick question. Is the supply room still stocked, Dadbeo?" As a teacher, Iruka responded more out of habit than because she truly considered Naruto's question. He would have been suspicious of the blonde's motivation if he had. He said, "Yes, we always keep some supplies in stock," but his question was suspicious. "Why?" he asked. Naruto quickly informed him, "No time. Gotta go, thanks," before rushing out the door that Iruka had seen him approaching the entire time he was speaking. Before another, with black hair and a conspicuous lack of clothes, bounded into Iruka's room, he left him to wonder what that was all about. Even as his face turned red, he exclaimed, "Kushina Sama," in shock at the woman's appearance and attire. W. What are you doing?" As though nothing was amiss, she said, "Oh, hello, Amino. Sensei. Databane, did my son come through here recently?" He started to say, as a matter of fact, yes. He was asking about the supply room of all things, but was interrupted when the woman stormed out of the room while shouting something about smoke bombs. Once more, Iruka's mouth worked faster than his brain. Iruka was never able to identify it, but it must have been significant because she soon discovered them when smoke filled the entire academy. Iruka carefully closed the door and tried to patch up any cracks. He sank back into his seat. His window was open, at least. The final member of the Namikaze family was solidified by a flash of light that came through that open window. Suddenly, Iruka stood up and exclaimed, H. Hokage. Sama. Sorry. I'm trying to catch my wife and son and saw them come in through here. Which way did they go?" the blonde man said, rubbing the back of his head and gesturing to Iruka. With a wave of his hand toward the supply room, Iruka said, "Down there, somewhere. I checked the supply room, if you can get past all the smoke." As he opened the door, Minato asked again, "Smoke?" His nose stung and his eyes watered as the black smoke blew in. "Okay, that was a Konoha smoke bomb. It was specifically made to cover one's trail and render pursuers immobile. Just send the bill over the supplies lost to me personally. I'll cover the costs," Minato said sheepishly as he closed the door and turned to face Iruka. Minato had a feeling he would say that a lot today. "And the damage costs?" With a sigh, "That too." "Okay then," Iruka said, returning to his personal organizing tasks while he waited for the Hokage to vanish in yet another burst of light. Iruka took out the sake bottle and cup from beneath his desk after he was certain he was alone. He sighed and started to pour. That Naruto didn't need it after graduating is a waste of time. Alongside Naruto in his hiding spot, the blonde prankster sat with his knees pulled up to his chest and did his best to create the least amount of noise possible. After restocking from the academy, hurling one of the smoke bombs directly at her face, and setting off the others in the supply room, he had managed to lose his mother once more. How much worse could things get than messed with mom's hair, levels of death? He was aware that he was making things worse. All he needed to do now was remain silent until someone told Dad about it, and he was able to reassure Mom enough that she wouldn't kill him right away. He fingered the numerous cuts on his clothing absently. He had nearly been hit by a couple of those chain spikes from Kushina. He could hear a muffled conversation going on around him, but he was sure Oji-san would save his bacon. Otherwise, he would have at least one more smoke bomb. He had to make the most of his final one. Naruto could just make out that it was a man and a woman conversing as the voices grew louder. Naruto focused and used his devil fruit, hoping to hear more. All over his body, fur started to grow. It was red on the rest, white on his chest and under his chin, and black on his hands and limbs. His face elongated into a half snout that pulled back on his scars. 2 bushy foxtails grew from his back, and black ears replaced his natural ones on his head. Finally, he developed claws and teeth. Naruto recognized the voices as those of Oji-san and his mother, and he could hear them approaching with his newly improved hearing. "There you are, Naruto. I've been looking all over for you, Databane," Kushina said in an overly positive voice, lifting the lid of the barrel that Naruto was hiding in at the back of Ichiraku Ramen. I told you that we were working on your combat training today, not stealth, she said. This time, Kushina was prepared for Naruto's reaction, which was to scream in fear and hurl his smoke bomb in her face. After grabbing the bomb and using it to pierce Naruto's eyes, she slammed the barrel's lid back on. Thank you again for helping me find my son, Tuchi-san. Can I borrow the barrel for a bit? I'll be sure to bring it back in a workable condition, she said to the older man who owned her favorite restaurant, utterly disregarding the hacking and swearing coming from inside the barrel. Now, Naruto was being harmed by his improved senses. Knowing that the barrel wouldn't return intact, the man simply gave her a smile behind his eyes that never seemed to open and said, "No, thank you, Kushina-san. It was nice of you to pay off an extra portion of your tab early. Take the barrel for as long as you need." Despite Naruto's forceful kicks, the barrel was swiftly secured with chains, which also prevented the top from opening. Then, with composure, Kushina left the ramen shop and started to make his way home. "Kushina, there you are. I've been trying to stop you from, what's with the barrel?" Minato said cautiously before she could go very far. With a false sense of innocence, she said, "Oh, this old thing? It's nothing you need to worry about." Before cutting the chains holding the lid down and launching a beam of light from his finger, Minato gave her the most uninteresting glance he could muster. The lid was quickly removed by Naruto's foot, and his regular head emerged from the smoke. Engulfed barrel. Minato arched an eyebrow at his wife and said, "Nothing to worry about," as he started to take huge breaths. "Nothing at all." With a sigh, Minato scratched the back of his head, a nervous tic he had never been able to completely get rid of. He transformed his feet into light and swiftly seized Kushina and Naruto in his hands. He carried them to their home behind the Hokage monument by taking a few short steps off of carefully positioned mirrors positioned throughout the village. Minato whispered to himself, "What am I going to do with you two?" As if he were his lifeline, Naruto jumped out of the barrel and clung to his father, saying, "Dad, you've got to save me from Mom, Datbeo." In her most convincing voice, Kushina said, "Minato, you have a busy day ahead of you, organizing all those genin teams. Just leave Naruto with me and go back to work." The image she was trying to convey was ruined by the chains behind her, which were rattling and moving like snakes. Minato suggested, "Let's just all calm down for a minute." He began by asking Naruto, "Naruto, why is your mother's hair black?" After realizing that he was the root of all the problems. Naruto retorted, "Because you left for work without taking a shower." "See, Kushina, Naruto didn't mean to dye your hair black. It probably comes out really easily, right?" Minato nodded, hoping that was what he was hoping. Naruto was dead if it didn't. And he had been ecstatic to be recognized as a genin. To celebrate, Minato even got him a brand new pair of kunai. With a quick nod of agreement, Naruto said, "Yeah, all you have to do is run it underwater. It's not even dye, just ink. There, you see? Just take another shower and your hair will be back to its beautiful red in no time," Minato said to her prior to turning to Naruto, "and let this be a lesson to you about planning ahead. You never know when someone's plans will change and you could end up catching the wrong person instead." Kushina left for another shower after Naruto nodded. Minato returned to the Hokage Tower to conclude with the teams, feeling relieved that the crisis had been avoided. In order to balance the anchors on that tracking team he was considering assembling, he needed to find a good floater. Minato walked away with names and abilities floating through his head. "You're not letting me off the hook just because the die comes out, are you?" Naruto asked the empty room as he slowly reached down to the pouch he had strapped to his leg at the academy. "We're going to have a fun sparring session today." "Nope," Kushina exclaimed cheerfully as she called back from her bedroom. "You made me chase you around the entire village in nothing but a towel and threw several smoke bombs at me." "Great," Naruto exclaimed as he surveyed his surroundings. The door and windows were barred with chains. He was down to a few ninja wire and a couple kunai. It was up there, but not the worst he'd ever been in. When he tried to examine the windows, he discovered that his left foot was immobile. A quick look down showed that when he attempted to move, one of his mother's chains, which was wrapped around his ankle, tightened. He had never been in a worse situation than he was now. "I'm going to take a shower to wash all this ink away. You sit tight until then and when I'm done we can go and have our little spar." Kushina appeared in the doorway holding a set of clothes. Naruto nodded silently, and Kushina held out her hand. "The pouch." Naruto complained a little, but tossed over the pouch. With a nod, Kushina put it away to come back later and made his way to the restroom. Before completely changing into his fox form, Naruto waited until he heard the sound of the shower turning on. He was not going to wait around until she was finished. His mother's voice interrupted him as he turned to grab his leg, saying, and no biting off your leg. Naruto returned to his usual state. How did she do that, damn it? In order to prevent it in the future, he had to learn. Even though she wasn't there to keep an eye on him, he would swear that her chains occasionally had a mind of their own and he didn't want to take the chance. The following day, academy classroom. So your mom caught you, huh? Sasuke asked with no real purpose. After telling him to shut up, Naruto slid into a chair at the desk next to Sasuke. He had been able to dress appropriately today, using his forehead protector around his neck, black pants, blue sandals, a pair of old orange goggles on his head, and a blue shirt underneath an orange jacket. His cheeks and forehead were covered in bandages, which was the most noticeable change. Sasuke was aware that there would undoubtedly be more beneath his shirt because Kushina didn't mince words when instructing someone. Perhaps the suffering was a teaching tool. Although she was correct, the students were not comforted by this. You know what the teams will be? Sasuke asked Naruto with a grunt. Snorted Naruto. Nah. Dad didn't get home till late last night after I was asleep from all of Mom's sparring. Even if I was awake, there was no way I'd get them out of him. Dad's a real pushover most of the time, but when he gets serious his lips are sealed tighter than the Devil Fruit Vault's doors. HN, was the answer from Sasuke. He still had to ask, even though he had anticipated as much. Unconsciously imitating his friend's gesture, Sasuke said, I'll tell you this, though, as Naruto leaned in. I'll bet my left foot that the reason Iruka Sensei is telling us where to sit will have our teammates for the Genin cell. You sure that it's not a fake out? There were 10 3-man desks in the room and 30 children in their class. Yeah, pretty sure. From who's here it seems like a safe bet and I wouldn't put it past him. Naruto was aware that their class was at a disadvantage due to the presence of so many well-known students and that only 1/3 of the students would pass. Hyuga, Akamichi, Nara, Yamanaka, Uchiha, Namikaze, Aburame, and Inuzuka. He was positive that 5 of those clans had consumed devil fruits. There was only one spot available for the top civilian student to take because none of the other children in their class had eaten any fruit. Although there was always the remote possibility that the class could create a 4th team, Naruto assumed that their class wouldn't based on their performance throughout the year. After Sasuke gave his consent, the two started debating who was the most qualified applicant for their class. The two hadn't bothered to check where everyone else had fallen because Sasuke had won Rookie of the Year for every class and Naruto had automatically won first place for their class. As the remaining children filed in, they now felt remorse for their choice. Naruto muttered, well, we've got the civvy, as he observed Hinata sit down beside Kiba and Shino. That was the final clan member whose devil fruit status was unknown. Sasuke whispered, HN, think it'll be a problem? Maybe, I don't remember much about the other kids, what do you think? I think we'll be fine after a couple weeks of training. They'll be the best civilian in the class and if we help them improve as well then there shouldn't be a problem. Naruto turned around and said, excuse me, after feeling a hand tap his shoulder. A girl with green eyes, pale skin, and long pink hair was standing behind him. She wore black sandals, a forehead protector that doubled as a headband, and dark biker shorts underneath her red dress. You're blocking the other chair. Leaning back to his side of the desk, Naruto let the girl take a seat. What's her name? He mouthed behind her back as he leaned back in his chair casually and met Sasuke's gaze. He didn't even know who she was. If she was just a random civilian, there was really no reason for him to learn her name because she didn't sit next to him and wasn't from a clan or important civilian family. Although he was the Hokage and Naruto wasn't even an official genin, his father did know the names of almost everyone. It was a miracle that he could recall every name and face his mother had taught him. Sasuke took out a piece of paper and arched an eyebrow in recognition. He scribbled something down in a hurry, crossed it out, shook his head, then rolled the paper up and tossed it over his shoulder. If Naruto hadn't caught it, it would have struck him in the face after bouncing off the desk behind them. Naruto snorted as he saw Sasuke take out another piece of paper and begin writing something that appeared to be about flame temperatures. Bastard simply had to flaunt himself. Naruto read the name on the message after unfolding it. Sakura Haruno. It's good to know that their teammate had that name. No one was aware of the message when he crumpled the ball again and burned it beneath the table with a tiny blue flame. Iruka entered shortly after and started reading his speech about their graduation. For the most part, Naruto ignored him. It was merely formality, and he understood the gist of what Iruka would say. He would pay attention when the names began to appear. Naruto was correct about the seating arrangements, and he didn't have to wait long for Iruka to start reading the names. Team 7 will consist of Haruno Sakura, Namikaze Naruto, and Uchiha Sasuke. Before giving each other a fist bump, Naruto and Sasuke exchanged a smug grin. Sakura's reaction was more astonished, and she glanced anxiously at the two boys next to her. She had recently been assigned to a team that included two of the most accomplished and well-liked pupils in the school, not to mention their class. Her nervousness was understandable. Let's go team, she said, winced, and stuttering slightly. Sakura, you made a great first impression. Stuttering in the presence of your cool and successful teammates. Soon after, Iruka completed the teams. The clan kids were assembled as expected. Team 10 consisted of Nara Shikamaru, a boy with black eyes and black hair pulled back into a spiky ponytail, wearing a short gray jacket over a mesh undershirt, black pants, and a pair of gloves over his hands that he had never worn to class before. Yamanaka Ino, a girl with long, pale blonde hair with a bang over her right eye and the rest in a ponytail, was dressed in a purple blouse and apron skirt, with bandages around her waist and white sleeves on her arms. Last but not least was Akamichi Choji, a heavy-set boy with short, spiky brown hair and red swirls on his cheeks. He was wearing black shorts, bandages on his arms and legs, a strange blue headband that ran down the middle of his head, and a green jacket over a pale shirt with the kanji for food. Team 8 consisted of Inazuka Kiba, a boy with two tattoos of red fangs on his cheeks, a gray hoodie with dark fur lining, and black pants covering his legs. Hyuga Hinata, a girl with short purplish hair and pale lavender eyes like the rest of her clan, wearing a pale jacket and black pants. He was accompanied by Kiba's white puppy partner, Akamaru. Aburame Shino, a boy with straight brown hair and spiky eyes, came last. Like the other members of his clan, he always wore black glasses to conceal his eyes. He was wearing brown pants and a light gray coat with a collar high enough to hide his lower face. Then, one by one, the potential Jonin instructors started to come in to retrieve their potential genin. Being skipped over in the order surprised the newly formed Team 7, but they didn't give it any thought. After that, every team was picked up and left to wait. They were still waiting after 5 minutes had passed. By the time 10 minutes had passed, two of the participants understood what was happening. Sasuke said, "You don't think, first, there's no way Dad would let him teach a team. He's too busy doing all those high-ranked missions to take on a team of genin," Naruto insisted. Overcoming her awkwardness, Sakura's curiosity about their missing Jonin prompted her to ask, "Who are you two talking about?" She heard someone say, "That would be me," from the window that had not yet been fixed. A young man wearing the Konoha uniform, wearing a forehead protector, was the owner of the voice. His hair was spiky and his eyes were black. "Hello, I'm your Jonin instructor, Uchiha Obito. I apologize for being late, but I had to assist an elderly woman with her groceries," the man said with a smile and a two-fingered greeting. Rooftop Academy. In order to conduct an icebreaker activity, Obito had demanded that the team gather on the roof. The others were sitting cross-legged across from him, and he was leaning against the railing. "Okay, here's how this'll work. We'll start by telling each other our names and 3 things about ourselves. Likes, dislikes, and hobbies. Naruto'll start, then it'll go Sakura, Sasuke, me. Any questions?" Naruto simply implied that he knew Sakura when he waved his hand and said, "Yeah. Why are we doing this, Obito? OJ, sensei. Sasuke and I've known you since we were kids and we've been classmates with Sakura for years. Aren't you and her the only ones that really need to get to know each other?" He was unwilling to tell the girl that he still didn't know who she was. Allowing one of your partners to discover that you hardly knew they existed is a great way to begin your teamwork. Obito covered his face with his hand. Even so, he should have anticipated this when he found out that Sasuke and Naruto would be joining his team. "Naruto, ever since I became a Jonin I've dreamt of having my own team of genin. I've been waiting years for this moment. Would it kill you to humor me?" he begged. All right. Naruto sighed as he rose and cleared of his throat. "My name's Namikaze Naruto. I like ramen, pranks, training, my friends, and my family. I dislike training with my mom when she's mad at me, learning about politics, and getting caught when pranking. My hobbies are, well, I guess pranking counts as training, so training and eating ramen." Sakura slowly stood up as Naruto sat down. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "My name's Haruno Sakura. I like spending time with my friends, gardening, and shopping. I dislike people that judge others on appearance. My hobby is gardening, I guess. That's it." After Sakura hastily sat down, Obito nodded. She was obviously anxious around him and her new teammates. She came from a merchant family and was friends with the Yamanaka girl in her class, based on his previous understanding. The fact that the three of them were from the highest echelons of the shinobi social hierarchy and easily outskilled her must indicate that she knows enough about shinobi politics. Her resolute statement that she didn't like those who made snap judgments based solely on appearance was the only strange aspect. Perhaps her hair had caused her to be teased as a child. The color was strange. It appears that he needed to focus on boosting Sakura's confidence and comfort level around her teammates. Smiling at Sasuke, Obito said, "And lastly, my adorable cousin. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I like my family, training, my friend, and fire. I dislike things that waste my time, certain members of my clan," Sasuke said, glaring at Obito, who gave him a cheeky smile in return. Obito responded by acting like he had been stabbed. "Clan politics, and failure. My hobby is training." He raised his hands. "I already introduced myself, but I'm Uchiha Obito. My likes are my wife Rin, my team, Konoha, and helping others. My dislikes are those that abandon their comrades. My hobby is also training." Sakura glanced at her team's other three members with concern. They all clearly knew one another and had fairly similar interests. In order to prevent herself from becoming an outsider on her own team, she made the decision to train harder and try her hardest to get along with them. The three graduates awoke to the news of an official mission, and Obito grinned as he resumed his speech and drew Sakura out of her reverie. "So that's it for introductions. Tomorrow we start with our first official duties as shinobi. I wouldn't be so excited if I were you," he said, leaning his head on one hand. "Our first mission is a survival test." Obito decided to put on a slightly thicker smile in response to their bewilderment. "Don't you know, out of everyone in your class, only 3 teams will become official genin. The rest of them will fail and can never become ninja." Obito congratulated himself inwardly. He recalled that Minato Sensei had been waiting to use the same speech when he had delivered it to his team. He had also tried his best to imitate Kakashi's movements. The professionalism and delivery of his more somber teammate had always been taken more seriously than Obito's own gregarious and upbeat demeanor. He was expecting to see the astonishment and surprise on Sakura's face when he looked at the faces of his new genin team, but Naruto and Sasuke didn't seem impressed. "We know," said Naruto. "The teams that'll fail are made up of the civilian kids. The actual teams all have devil fruit users and the clan kids on their teams. The civilians get an academy education, or failed as genin, and then go on to their civilian jobs with the basics of how to defend themselves. Sasuke and I both have eaten devil fruits and Sakura's the best civilian kid, so she's our floater. Unless we're all complete garbage we'll pass no problem. And Sasuke was rookie of the year and I was the best in our class, so that won't be an issue." All pretenses of being frightened vanished, and Obito gaped at Naruto. All the wind was blown out of his sails, and the sail with it, by the little bastard. Did he learn the system's operation from Minato Sensei? What on earth? That made administering the bell test to them less enjoyable. Given that Naruto had stated that they only needed to put on a strong performance and not pass it, how was he supposed to give it? Sakura had even lost her fear. In fact, she appeared outraged. "Goddammit, Naruto." Obito finally swore after gathering his courage. "Who told you that?" "Dad brought some student profiles and let me help out with some of the team creations once when he was running late on making teams and Mom was out on a mission. He told me how they worked then." Obito moaned and took out 3 sets of papers, cursing his sensei in his mind. "This is a bunch of stuff for your parents that hand you over to the Konoha military so you can become genin. That's it for me. See you guys tomorrow. 8 o'clock sharp." Obito waved distractedly at the children before jumping off the roof onto the other roofs throughout the village. "These explain where to meet tomorrow and what we'll be doing. These are liability forms to fill out to apply to become official genin." "So what now?" Sakura asked tremblingly. Other than their reputations in the classroom, she didn't really know either boy. According to Ino, Sasuke was the smartest child in their class and one of the best fighters, but he was also somewhat of a recluse who rarely spoke to anyone outside of the clan kids. Despite being a mischievous and prankster, Naruto was among the best fighters in his class and the best at snooping and setting traps. In order to prevent them from totally overwhelming their opponents, Iruka Sensei had frequently pitted the two against one another. Despite his apparent gregariousness and willingness to help, the majority of the civilian children had shunned him out of fear of upsetting the Hokage's son. It was a common rumor in the village that the Anbu commander had a group of the best Anbu members following Naruto around, and that if anything happened to him while they were watching, all of the remaining members were demoted to permanent genin and stripped of their rank. Children who didn't really expect anything more dangerous than the simulated academy fights in their lives were generally put off by that. After exchanging glances, Naruto and Sasuke decided in silence, "We plan." Ramen Ichiraku. As the three of them awaited their order, Sakura remarked, "You know, when you said we were going to plan, I expected something more professional." After guiding her through the village to this charming little ramen stand, Naruto and Sasuke introduced her to Tuchi, the proprietor, and his assistant and daughter, Ayame. She was a young woman with a warm smile and long brown hair. "This is literally the only place Naruto will choose to eat. I only agree because he always pays," said Sasuke. "You could find him anytime just by staking out outside and waiting 5 minutes." "Really?" Sakura attempted to smile, but her response sounded just as shaky. "It's time to switch topics. So why are we planning for tomorrow? You already said that we were basically guaranteed to pass." "Obito. Sensei's known me since I was a baby and he's Sasuke's cousin somehow. I think on his mom's side. Anyways, he isn't going to go easy on us during the bell test, and if we manage to impress him enough we might be able to move on to doing C-ranked missions instead of the crappy D-ranked ones," Naruto said. Sasuke noticed that Sakura hadn't gotten it in. D-ranked missions are basically glorified chores that anyone can hire genin teams to do. They're supposed to support teamwork and let new teams get to know each other and earn some cash. Genin teams pretty much spend their time either working or training, so we learn how to work in teams and get stronger before we are allowed to go out on actual missions. Sakura gave a sympathetic nod. Looking back, she realized that she had never noticed genin working around the village, but she had seen it occasionally. It had never worried her because she had always assumed it was an official ninja thing. "So if we show that we can work together and take on Obito, Sensei, we should be able to cut down on how long it'll take us to go on real missions," Naruto said. That was something Sakura could support. She had no desire to be a glorified servant to anyone. "How are we going to do that?" Even Sasuke smiled a little, and Naruto's face stretched into a huge grin. They were pleased to see Sakura so supportive of their strategy. Watering at the mouth, Naruto said, "First things first," in the most solemn tone he could muster. In front of the children were 3 bowls of hot ramen. Time to eat. The three of them discussed how they would defeat their Jonin sensei in the test tomorrow while they were eating. Naruto described his plans and went over the fundamentals of the bell test. Every time Sasuke felt Naruto was missing something or could add something useful, he would contribute. Sakura sat through the planning, largely nodding in agreement with his statements and adjusting tensely to the way of life she had now been drawn into. She occasionally made a valid point, but overall, it seemed like she didn't add much to the planning process. She decided that she would perform better in the morning. The three completed their meal and Naruto paid for it after they had finalized their plan. In order to prepare, they decided to gather their belongings and arrive at the training location 2 hours early tomorrow. After that, they parted ways and went back to their families. Sasuke and Naruto prepared their belongings for the next day and went to bed without any problems that evening, but Sakura remained up late because she was too nervous to fall asleep. She eventually fell asleep, but it was a restless sleep. Grounds for training the three would be genin were bored as the morning sun rose higher in the sky. On the way to the training grounds, Sasuke had woken up first and met Naruto. Soon after, Sakura arrived, and they immediately got to work booby-trapping the whole forest. Being one of the best trappers in the entire village, Naruto was in charge of the operation. Every trap in the book and more had been set up by them. In case they neglected to eliminate some of them, they are all non-lethal by shinobi standards. They didn't think Obito would be caught in them. He was a seasoned jonin who had likely encountered more traps than they could keep track of. No, the purpose of the traps was merely to divert his attention and slow him down. He could potentially fall into some of Naruto's intricate chain traps, but only if he chose to go in a specific direction would those traps work. The trio intended to take him on a wild chase through the forest, trap him in the middle, and then make a last-ditch effort to get the bells. Sakura must have said, "He's late," for the 100th time. Obito had instructed them to arrive at 8, and the sun indicated that it was about 10. They had been sitting around being bored for the last 2 hours. They had initially attempted to communicate with one another but ultimately ran out of ideas. They were briefly distracted by Naruto's suggestion that kunai throw competitions be held, but that was short-lived. After that, kunai changed into shuriken, rocks, and finally rock, paper, scissors. Around 55 to 60.2 to 33. Sakura had paused. It hadn't been good for her. Sasuke said, "Obito. Sensei's always late," as he leaned against one of the 2 wooden posts that were free of shuriken and kunai scratches. He's so nice that he can't help helping people around the village on his ways to places. Mom says that he'll be late to his own funeral. Dad used to tell me stories of how they could never start a mission on time because Obito Sensei would hold them up. He'd always arrive running and saying some excuse about helping old ladies or something. They were always true, but they didn't find it out until about the 5th time he did it. Then Dad would tell them to report, like, an hour earlier than they had to so that Obito Sensei'd show up on time. It got to the point that his tardiness spread to the whole team and none of them could show up on time anywhere because they kept forgetting that other people actually scheduled things on time, Naruto recalled. Muttered, "That's pretty sad," Sakura said. Then she became anxious. What if they experienced the same thing? They would eventually acquire Obito's reputation for being late if he continued to make them late for every mission or training session. I wasn't really that bad. Obito was sitting atop the scarred post when the three of them turned to look around. Yo! Sakura shouted, "You're late. And what do you mean you weren't that bad? You just showed up 2 hours late to our first training mission." She raised her arms toward him. That doesn't exactly set a good precedent, does it, Obito Sensei? The three waited in silence for a few seconds before Obito drew out 3 bells and said, "Now for the bell test." "Don't be like that. I've got a good reason this time." Sakura yelled, "Why were you late?" Naruto joined her. All Sasuke did was roll his eyes. Time was wasted on this. As if he hadn't heard them, Obito went on, "I'm sure by now that our resident smartass," Naruto squawked in frustration and was ignored, "told you all how the bell test works. 2 bells, 2 victors. Loser doesn't eat lunch. So I had to mix it up a little." Obito jangled all 3 bells for emphasis, saying, "This bell test requires you all to get a bell. If even one of you doesn't get a bell, then none of you can eat lunch." This time, all 3 protested, but Obito persisted, saying, "Also, instead of automatically passing because you've got some fancy devil fruits, you only become official genin if you can take all 3 bells from me." Naruto exclaimed in shock, "What? There's no way that you convinced my dad to agree to that." When Obito said, "You're right. I didn't," then why? "Your mother did." Naruto lost his confidence. Yes, he was able to believe that. His mother was able to wrap both of them around her pinky toe simultaneously, even though he might have been able to wrap his dad around his finger. His father could not possibly outlive his mother. Obito exclaimed, "So, to get everyone's attention once more." Obito stood up, took a timer from his bag, and set it on the post he had been sitting on before. "Come at me with the intent to kill or else you'll fail. This timer will be set to go off at noon. If it goes off and I still have a bell left, then you all fail." Sasuke tried to cut the bells free while facing away, but Obito's foot kicked him in the face, stopping him. Obito scolded Sasuke, "Hey! I didn't even start the timer yet," as though he were cheating in a game. Putting aside his spat, Sasuke said, "I don't remember you saying that we had to wait." After pausing as though he was thinking about Sasuke's point, Obito said, "Fair enough." The man then pressed the button, and the timer began. Begin. In response, Obito was hit by a barrage of shuriken. His 3 students disappeared into the trees as he ducked out of his way. Sakura harshly whispered, still trying to keep quiet, "What's going on? I thought you two knew what was going to happen." As they swiftly regrouped to discuss what to do. "So did we. Obito Sensei's deciding to play some real hardball." "Look, it doesn't matter. The plan's the same, the stakes are just a lot higher than we originally thought," Sasuke told them. "First off, we need to get deeper into the woods to where we set all the traps. We're going to have to open with our riskier plans. Let's go." After running into the woods, the 3 quickly came upon a dangerous discovery. They had shifted their traps. Since many of their traps had been switched or altered entirely, the locations they had committed to memory were no longer useful. Bear traps were replaced with spike traps, pitfalls were filled in and rope nooses installed, and otherwise safe locations were turned deadly. They found a safe spot on a tree branch and immediately stopped running. Sakura trembled and spoke again, "What the hell is going on? What's happening?" "He switched the traps," a shocked Naruto muttered. "That bastard switched all of our traps around. And added new ones," Obito exclaimed with a smile. He was standing above them on the branch of another tree when the genin started. He grinned at the horrified expressions on his students' faces when they realized what was happening, saying, "You had such a good idea yesterday to trap the forest that I just couldn't resist helping you out. Yeah, little advice. Don't discuss your plans in a public place. You never know who could be listening." Saying, "So you were so late to the meeting because you were in the woods changing everything around," Sasuke expressed what everyone was thinking. Technically I was right on time, but you were right about why I didn't show myself for 2 hours. Let this be a lesson to you all. Don't go bragging about knowing something that other people don't know you know. Information is worth more than gold, and if you let people know you have it they'll do their damnedest to make sure that it's useless, Obito informed them. So you were spying on us the whole time and learned our entire plan, Sakura replied. Yep. Then I adjusted to this new information and turned it to my advantage. That's how the job works. Granted, all this learning won't be much good if you can't grab all of these. Obito raised the bells and began to jingle. When Naruto threw a kunai at him out of frustration, Obito caught it in midair and said, "It won't be that easy." Naruto let out a frustrated growl. Naruto shouted, "Guys, let's get him," and then leapt up the tree, with Sakura, Obito, and Sasuke right behind him. Obito arched a laughing eyebrow. Although he was somewhat disappointed that they were using a straight charge at the enemy so soon after their initial plan failed, he chose to make fun of the three. After Naruto got to him first, Obito easily sidestepped his blow and used the same hand to block all of Naruto's blows. He took a punch, turned Naruto's arm around, and kicked him in the butt into a net trap that he was swiftly caught in before Sasuke and Sakura could get there. Obito quickly disarmed Sasuke of the kunai he had used in his attack. Sakura and Sasuke launched an attack together, but because she was clearly weaker and moved more slowly than her teammate, Obito was able to quickly knock her out of the fray by using his stolen kunai to pin the back of her shirt to the tree trunk. Obito slipped under Sasuke's kick and fell to a lower branch to avoid a thrown shuriken as he tried to take advantage of Sakura's distraction. Sasuke had 3 shuriken in each hand and was getting ready to throw them, according to a look-up. To block the shuriken, Obito pulled a set out of the air and drew a kunai. Then he saw that Sasuke's hand had been yanked across his body and that wires were fastened to them. The pull caused the Jonin to spin, and he used the momentum to backhand Sasuke's face and drag him forward. A pair of shuriken descended from the sky and severed the wire as he tried to draw Sasuke closer for another blow. In order to avoid Naruto's dropkick, Obito looked up and took a step back. Obito sensed the wind from Naruto's claws as they passed inches from his nose as the blonde transformed into his hybrid form. He simply caught it in midair and threw it back ring first, hitting her in the forehead when Sakura attempted to throw a kunai at him. She lost her balance and fell off the limb due to the force. Obito hurried to catch her after spotting that she was going toward a bear trap. They landed across from the hidden trap after Sakura was apprehended. When Sakura realized she hadn't collided with the earth, she opened her eyes. "Why?" she asked, looking up at Obito bewildered. "According to Obito, because I'm your sensei. I'm here to teach you, not kill you," he said quietly. That final throw was likely a bit too forceful on his part. The bruise had already started to appear. Probably ought to have also gone for a body shot. "Thank you," said Sakura earnestly. Obito smiled casually and put her down. He grabbed Sakura's wrist as soon as he felt a hand brush against his side. One of the bells was clasped in her hand and almost tore off his belt when he pulled it to the side. Nice try, but not good enough. Obito turned his head in response to Sasuke's yelling and saw his relative in the middle of a leap, thrusting 2 kunai at him. Obito felt let down. He simply squandered a perfectly good sneak attack. That wasn't how Sasuke was supposed to be. Then, just inches away from Obito, kunai and shuriken passed through Sasuke, causing his body to start burning. Shit! Obito instinctively turned on his devil fruit and let the kunai go through him. It also made it possible for Sakura and one of the bells to escape his grasp. "You got me. I didn't think that you'd pull off both of those at once, but you did. Color me impressed." Obito's eyes narrowed, and he had to acknowledge that it had been a pretty good strategy when the 3 of them regrouped. But don't think that I'll fall for that again. That had been one of their better ideas, the genin grimaced. Some of their more desperate schemes had involved Sakura pretending to be hurt in order to approach Obito because it was only training, and using Sasuke to obstruct Obito's vision before hurling a kunai through him. They could only be used once before he discovered the trick. They were at a disadvantage when they used both at once. They had the good fortune to improvise just in time when Sakura was knocked off balance and headed for a trap. When Sasuke and Naruto realized that Obito had caught her attempting to swipe the bells, they quickly made adjustments. It had done some good, but they were out of options. "Come on, guys. 1 down 2 to go," Naruto said in an effort to boost spirits. Sakura responded with a slight smile, and Sasuke grinned back. Obito informed them, "Yeah, no, you're not going to touch a bell again." Earlier, he had been overconfident. Instead of genuinely protecting the bells, he was too busy trying to teach them something. He was going to make sure they understood that they weren't supposed to win this fight. And they did by the time Obito finished. He adhered to his pledge that they would not touch a bell. Hell, they were unable to even touch him. The three genin were dominated by Obito. The first to fall was Sakura. Obito separated her from the two boys and took her out at that time, taking advantage of the fact that she was the weakest link. She was eliminated from the fight after a blocked kunai and a tap to the back of the head. After that, Naruto and Sasuke attempted to attack him, but he simply threw Sakura at them to disperse them. Naruto was already committed to his attack when Sasuke caught her. He tried to strike Obito with his claws using sweeping motions, but the man retaliated with the kunai he had taken from Sakura. Even at close range, fireballs were avoided, and Obito had no trouble handling the teeth that were attempting to grasp his face when Naruto transformed into his full two-tailed kitsune form. Obito managed to grab Naruto by the tail and pull him into a knee strike, which was followed by a choke slam, thanks to Naruto's new form. After completing his check up on Sakura, Sasuke attempted to engulf Obito in a stream of flames. The man simply punched him in the jaw while walking through the flames. After being knocked back into a tree, Sasuke had to quickly avoid every attack from Obito. After a while, Obito settled into a rhythm, but he soon realized that Sasuke was evading every punch he delivered, regardless of how quickly he delivered them. He instantly launched himself into a leg sweep that covered his entire left side, his eyes widening in surprise, and felt the reward when he hit Sasuke's leg from behind. Looking over to where Naruto had been, one could see the boy holding out one hand to Obito while he was perspiring profusely. He was dropped by a swift kunai ring to the head. With both of his teammates now behind him, Sasuke attempted a final, desperate attack, but before he could complete it, Obito nailed him in the gut and then hammered him into the ground. As he had learned from his sensei, the Jonin scratched the back of his head while observing his three defeated students. Maybe went a bit overboard there. 3 pairs of ears were assaulted by a loud ringing sound that jolted them back to consciousness. When Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto awoke groggily, they discovered that they were all strapped to the posts in the center of the training area. Naruto screamed, "Hey! What the hell?" as he fought the bonds, but he was quickly trapped. "Wakey, wakey, kiddos," Obito said with a smile. He had 4 lunchboxes in front of him and was seated across from the posts. He said with a sing-song tone, "So that was the timer for noon going off and you all only have 1 bell, so you know what that means," which really infuriated the 3. Then they recalled the training's guidelines. 3 heads hung in frustration and disappointment, some more than others. Sasuke resentfully remarked, "We're stuck going back to the academy," the mere act of saying that made his mouth feel awful. Failure. Because Obito hadn't had the opportunity to watch his genin team falter in the bell test, he would now be forced to perform over his academy days, even though he had won Rookie of the Year. It was unfair. How does Naruto fare? Both the Rookie of the Year and the son of the Hokage remained silent. Horrible. Sakura was the only person who was truly unaffected by this. She was an unimportant civilian. Hell, she would most likely return to her civilian life without bothering to retake the academy course. What? No, you all passed. You just don't get to eat lunch and have to watch me eat mine. In a moment, 3 sets of thoughts came to a halt. The 3 genin looked up at Obito in a robotic manner. The man was already eating the rice balls with gusto after opening his lunchbox. Rin was an excellent chef. Better than the water. Burning Obito, no doubt. 3 questions piled on top of one another and jammed in Naruto's mouth as he sputtered out, "But, why? How?" Sakura exclaimed, "What the hell is going on?" for the 3rd time in 2 hours. They were stunned by Obito's straightforward response, "I lied." Their eyes widened, and he watched with glee as flames began to erupt all over Sasuke's body, particularly in the area surrounding his eyes. "Did you guys really think that the Hokage would fail a team with 2 powerful devil fruit eaters just because I asked him to?" Naruto started to say, "But you said," but was interrupted. "I lied," Obito said once more. "I never talked to your mom about this, even if she would have been all for it and will probably be pissed that I didn't tell her so she could watch your reactions. I just feed you a scenario that you could easily believe." Sasuke pointed to the training grounds, his still-bound teammates, and himself as he asked, "So what was the point of all this?" Now that the rope surrounding him had been melted by his flames, he was free to move. Naruto now followed his example and burned through both Sakura's and his ropes. Why was rope being used to tie them up? One of the 3 was intangible, and the other 2 were capable of using fire. Other than a few crickets chirping in the distance, Obito received no response. The point of this exercise, as with every other exercise I'll have you guys do, is to teach you some sense. Hence, why I'm called your sensei. He had a sneaking suspicion that an Aburame was mocking him nearby. Make a mental note to persuade Naruto to play a practical joke on the Aburame later. Anyways, there were several important lessons here that I was trying to teach you all. Would anyone care to guess? Obito said, coughing awkwardly into his hand. Don't discuss our plans in public places. Obito gave Naruto a frustrated glance at his snarky comment. That's technically correct, but not much of a guess since I already told you that one. Any other guesses? Another cricket. It will undoubtedly inspire Naruto to play a practical joke on the Aburame. Consider making it a covert exercise. Wasn't that what Kushina did? It seemed to work from all of Naruto's stories, and if they were caught, he'd have a good excuse. He was veering off course, though. Okay, so there were several lessons here. I already told you about not discussing your plans in public places. Sometimes you won't be able to help yourself, so you'll have to improvise. Common covers are pretending to discuss book or movie plots, and if you know who you're working with well enough, you can reference past events or missions where you did something similar to your current plan. Obito raised his chopsticks toward him. For instance, now the three of you can reference the bell test if you want to talk about booby trapping something. Seriously, where did you guys even find enough stuff for all those traps? Did you raid an armory? Yes, Sasuke replied deadpan. That caused Obito's eyes to enlarge, and he turned to face the forest once more. They would most likely have to collect those traps by then, or Fugaku would be punished for stealing so much from the Uchiha armory, which also served as the armory for the police. The kids really jumped on that one, damn it. He didn't even believe that the armory had bear traps. Lesson number 2. Another one that was previously mentioned, don't go bragging about what you know. A secret is best kept between 3 people if 2 of them are dead. That means don't go bragging about knowing something in advance when you could just quietly inform your partners if they need to know. Naruto, what do you think would have happened if you hadn't told me that you knew about how the genin teams were chosen or talked about how the bell test worked? The blonde muttered in shame. You would have given us the standard bell test and wouldn't have bothered to lie about my dad making it so we had to succeed to pass. He felt guilty because that made the entire incident seem like his fault. And he was getting the evil eye from Sakura. She had a really nice evil eye, man. It's still quite good, though obviously not as good as his mother's. There was some shuffling and complaining as the bruises were rubbed, but nothing more. Right. Then you all could have just shown off some teamwork and I wouldn't have thought to check for traps, so you probably would have gotten the 2 bells without any issues. Moving on. Another lesson is that if a contact is late, then there's a chance you've walked into a trap. How late was I this morning, from your perspective? 2 hours. And how late am I normally? After a brief deliberation, Naruto and Sasuke responded, about half an hour tops. So it should have sent off some warning bells when I was so late, right? He muttered some more before receiving a few irate yeses. The 3 were kicking themselves for missing everything Obito was pointing out because it now seemed so clear. They were thought to be the intelligent children. Last lesson, when you realize that you're outmatched, run, Obito said gravely, his eyes seemingly losing focus on his pupil. We aren't a bunch of samurai. There's no honor in death, just emptiness and pain. There's also no use in a dead shinobi, but a live one can always be useful, even if they're crippled. The good of the village is more important than anyone's honor. If you have important information and end up fighting someone who can kill you because they called you a coward, then the village won't learn what that is because you'll be lying dead in a ditch somewhere with a giant hole in your chest. The children paused for a moment before Obito blinked and returned to normal. That's it for today's lessons. All that's left is the team picture. The 3 teammates formed a line in front of a tripod mounted camera that Obito had previously hidden. After pressing the button, Obito hurried to stand behind them. Smile. Obito put a hand on each boy's outside shoulder as Sakura, who was in the center, grabbed their arms and pulled them in. Obito went over to take the picture as soon as the camera went off. He showed it to them after waving it around a couple of times to let the ink dry. With everyone grinning and working as a cohesive team as they should, it was a pretty good photo. And with this Team 7 is now officially formed. The Konoha, while observing his students' progress, Obito was sitting on a roof. For their first mission without his direct supervision, they were performing reasonably well. Report. He said, reaching up to the shortwave radio in his ear. Before Naruto's voice could be heard, there was a burst of static that caused Obito to curse, fucking mutts. Then he was interrupted by another burst of static. Sasuke announced, Naruto's down, before Obito could inquire. He ran into Kurenai. Sensei's team while they were walking the Inuzuka's dogs and got treed. Obito let out a frustrated sigh. He was on the verge of leaving the blonde in the tree. Naruto was wise enough not to approach a group of dogs. He should not start hurling fireballs at them, I hoped. Does he need help? No, Kurenai. Sensei's team is trying to get the dogs under control. He'll get out, but he won't be much help unless we lose Tora again, replied Sasuke. According to Obito, speaking of Tora, how are you doing, Sakura? A voice said, I've still got her in sight, by Sakura. She's headed towards the Hokage Tower from the restaurant district. Sasuke said, moving to intercept, and then he stopped feeding. Obito got out of his crouched position and oriented himself. He leapt to his feet and started walking in the direction of the Hokage Tower. He wished to observe his two pupils' attempts to catch the cat. Capturing Tora, a slippery devil, was a frequent task for new genin teams. The cat kept getting out because her owner had a habit of giving him an overly tight hug while leaving the windows open. Giving the job to a genin team that was either growing too confident or as a test of their skills was essentially customary. About a week ago, Obito had to schedule the mission, and he was excited to see the outcome. Sakura was chasing the damned cat while she ran on the rooftops. When Naruto got caught up with the dogs, she almost lost her, but she was able to locate the red ribbon on her right ear. She was now waiting for Sasuke to grab her while keeping her visible. None of them could keep up with Tora. She had no idea how. After Naruto had spent 10 minutes pursuing her, she had been outrunning them for roughly 20 minutes. Catching a brown house cat was becoming a half-hour task. Sakura noticed a glint and saw Sasuke gesturing to her. Sakura halted her run and tossed a pair of shuriken to Tora's right after nodding in comprehension. To get away from the weapons, the cat leapt to the left and into an alley, landing exactly where Sasuke desired. With his hands spread wide, the dark-haired boy surrounded the cat with a ring of fire, making sure the flames were high enough to prevent Tora from jumping out of them. Sasuke placed a weighted net on the cat as it searched for a way out of the trap and then extinguished the fire. Tora only made her situation worse while still struggling in the net. Ignoring her attempts to claw him, Sakura caught up to him as he was removing the cat from the net. Nice job, Sasuke. She wiped the perspiration from her face and took deep breaths to lower her heart rate. A closer examination of Sasuke revealed that his breathing was only slightly heavier than usual, but that was to be expected since he was in better physical condition than Sakura and had chosen a quicker route to cut her and the cat off. Obito lowered himself beside the two. Nice job, team, he grinned. Even though Sakura and he were the only ones present to witness it, he said, though the ring of fire was a bit much, Sasuke. It wouldn't have hurt to exercise a little discretion. No, it wasn't. I didn't set the cat on fire, Sasuke answered. Obito changed the topic because he was unsure if his something cousin was kidding. We'll drop her off at the tower after we pick up Naruto from whichever tree he's in. Naruto said, no need, as he joined them in the alley. Although his clothes had multiple tears and his hair was unkempt, he appeared to be in good health. Guess I'm too late to help. A little, Obito said, rolling his eyes at him. I thought you knew better than to mess with the Inuzuka dogs. Naruto objected, hey, it wasn't my fault this time, they were upwind of me and that stupid cat tricked me. She sat down on a fence and baited those dogs to come after her. I was lucky Hinata and Shino were there to help keep them at bay. So she baited you as well as the dogs, called Sasuke. Naruto flipped him off with a frown. He was ignored by Sasuke. What about their other team member? What's his name, Kiba? Asked Sakura. Declaring, Kiba? He's a dick. Naruto waved the Inuzuka boy away. Bastard wanted to leave me in the tree for riling the dogs up. Well, since the gang's all here, let's go drop Tora off at the tower then get lunch, said Obito. Sasuke and Sakura nodded in agreement, and Naruto cheered. The cat claws continued to graze his face, but the former continued to ignore them. Sakura trailed behind the group as Obito led the way to the Hokage Tower. All of them were not what she had anticipated. She had been extremely anxious and worried when she first joined the team. She was far behind Sasuke and Naruto, who appeared to be much stronger. Being a genin had never been Sakura's ambition. She was only expected to complete her education and then assist her parents in their jobs. The closest Ino had ever come to the shinobi life was when she stopped by to talk. She was relishing her role as a genin now. Every morning, they would rise, gather at the Hokage Tower, and bide their time until Obito Sensei arrived, as he always did late. They would then train until they had to return home for dinner after spending the morning on chore rank missions throughout the village, followed by a lunch break. The missions were enjoyable to complete together, and the schedule was pleasant. Sakura had quickly discovered that Sasuke and Naruto seemed to prefer insults and enjoyed making fun of one another. Naruto would call Sasuke a bastard after Sasuke called him a dumbass, and they would argue for a while before fighting. Actually, it was kind of funny to watch. As they worked, Obito-sensei would observe them and occasionally give tips on how to complete tasks more quickly or effectively. Sakura was even beginning to enjoy sparring. She was learning, even though she couldn't yet defeat Sasuke or Naruto. Her now short hair was touched. Sakura had decided to cut her long hair to just her shoulders after Naruto and Sasuke had both exploited it during their first duel. They were learning more from Obito-sensei than just how to fight. They received instruction on a variety of topics, including tracking, trapping, and ambushes. He was far superior to the majority of the academy's teachers. Sakura had switched to a scentless shampoo and soap designed specifically for shinobi after discovering that the ones she used to wash left a scent that made her easier to track. That's what she was doing a lot lately. Weapons and camping gear were gradually taking the place of the dolls and toys in her room. The thought of how drastically her life was changing was odd. When Sakura heard Naruto say, "Oi, Sakura," she snapped out of her reverie. "Let's go. I don't want to be late to Ichiraku's." As they were walking, Sakura became aware that she had fallen behind and quickly caught up. She arrived just in time to hear Sasuke inform Naruto that he would not be having ramen again that week and that it was his turn to choose where they would eat lunch. Naruto begged Sasuke to change his mind while whining at him, but the Uchiha's still snarling cat threatened him. Sakura grinned as Obito and she shared a joke about Naruto. Being on a genin team was a lot of fun, bar Jonin. Teaching a genin team is so boring, Obito grumbled as he sat opposite his friend. There were 2 saucers and a bottle of sake between them. Through the navy mask covering his face, Obito's friend sipped his drink and rolled his gray eye. Along with his mask, which was fastened to his shirt, and a tanto strapped to his back over his flak jacket, the man was dressed in the traditional uniform. The man's spiky gray hair was held back from his forehead by his forehead protector, which was halfway down his face and covered his left eye. It stuck up so straight that it oddly seemed to defy gravity. "Oh, what happened to being so excited about becoming a Jonin sensei? Don't tell me you're ready to quit already," the man joked. He was aware of Obito's plight. He was too accustomed to challenging, high-ranking missions where your life was in jeopardy all the time. There was a sharp decline from high-profile assassination missions to observing a few children picking weeds. He had never left Anbu, in part because of it. Cooldown missions were at least B rank, but he did make sure to complete them. He would most likely lose his mind if he had to supervise a genin team. Obito said, "Fuck you, Kakashi," to his longtime companion and teammate. "You've taught kids before, right? Do you have any tips to stave of the boredom?" "There's a difference," Kakashi said, sipping from his sake cup. "I trained Anbu recruits, not teach a bunch of genin from the ground up." Obito's gaze shot up, hoping to catch a glimpse of what Kakashi's mask concealed, but the silver-haired Jonin was too quick. At yet another unsuccessful attempt to unlock the mystery that was Kakashi's face, Obito cursed. "Bah! Training ninja, teaching kids, what's the difference?" Kakashi raised his hand and started listing the distinctions with his index finger. One group is one person, already has the groundwork of a fighting style, missions experience, combat experience, several tricks, a framework of their abilities, and most likely have already dealt with some of the dirtier aspects of the job. The other has only basic academy knowledge, little training, is working with a group of people they've probably barely interacted with before, and you have your attention split between 3 different personalities and skill levels that you need to improve at the same time so that the team doesn't have any weak links. He sighed as Obito stared at him. "Personally, I believe that if I got stuck with a genin team I'd either train them into the ground and cause them to burn out or barely do anything with them in the hope that they become career genin." The idea made Obito wince, but he knew Kakashi was correct. He had been a member of the elite since they were young, establishing the record for Chunin without his devil fruit and for Jonin after he consumed it. He cringed at the idea of Kakashi, who had lived in the Anbu for the majority of his life, attempting to handle prepubescent children. There was no way that would work out. This was a man who found that his favorite ways to cope with his free time were to relax, read porn in public, annoy high-ranking ninja, and train with Might Guy. It's not really the best illustration of a well-adjusted Jonin. Obito said, "Fair point," then refilled the saucers and took a sip. Kakashi inquired, "How are the kids coming along anyways? You've got Sasuke, Naruto, and," he said absently, waving his hand in the air as if he remembered the last one. Obito did not fall for it. He was aware that Kakashi knew all of Konoha's soldiers, as well as many from the other villages. There's a reason why the man on the other side of him is the most lethal member of the Anbu forces. He had been playing games like this before. It was no surprise that the man preferred to conceal things 3 levels deeper than that, as he was always talking about looking underneath the underneath. He would, however, comply as usual. Haruno Sakura. Civilian girl that scored the highest out of the non-clan kids in the class. She's coming along quite well. She's really getting into the whole ninja lifestyle and is adjusting surprisingly well. Even did better than Naruto with the Tora mission today. With a visible eyebrow raise, Kakashi said, "Oh? The Tora mission already. And Naruto didn't do that well on it. That's surprising." Obito moved his hand from side to side. Not so much that he was bad. He was actually doing really well with tracking down that damned cat. He just ran into Kurenai's team while they were walking the dogs and it hadn't gone well. Say no more. I remember what happened when he ran into my dogs. Kakashi held up his hand. For 2 weeks, Naruto had been covered in bruises and scratches. However, it was intriguing that after only a few weeks of training, they had performed well on the Tora mission. Leaning slightly closer, Kakashi asked, "What are you planning?" A brief glance around before he began, "I'm thinking of taking them on missions outside the village." He quickly dismissed any objections that Kakashi might have, nothing major. Just a simple mission that'd get them some field experience. Sasuke and Naruto are getting antsy and Sakura is good enough for it now. I'm thinking something like an escort mission or maybe town defense. Give them a chance to see some of the world and maybe get in a fight with bandits or something. Have them experience their first kill in a controlled environment, something simple to work with. I'm thinking that it'll either make or break Sakura as well. Better to learn early rather than put more effort into her just to learn that she can't hack it later. Her family have history? Inquired Kakashi. Nodded. Dad. Part of one of the extra civvy teams. First combat experience he froze up and ended up costing the team the mission and ruined his hand. He was too injured and untrained to join the reserves or the police, so he was discharged and took up the family trade. Kakashi nodded his head. How are you planning on finding such a mission? It's not like you can just read through every C-rank mission that Konoha receives. Rin's helping me. She's promised that if she found a promising mission she'd pass it along to me instead of putting it into circulation, Obito replied with a grin. Ah, the benefits of having the Hokage's secretary as your wife, Kakashi remarked sardonically. A fresh voice said, what about the Hokage's secretary? Rin slid into the vacant seat between them, and both men looked up. Hope I'm not too late. Nah, we've barely even gotten started, Obito said, smiling and kissing her cheek. I was just telling Kakashi about that mission I'm looking for. Rin smiled at the glance that flashed in Obito's eyes and said, well, isn't that a coincidence? I just found it. He was genuinely feeling cooped up here. She reached into a hip pouch and took out a mission scroll. Here you go. It's a simple escort mission for an old bridge builder. His home country is under lockdown by a man named Gato and he needs protection from his thugs until he can finish building a bridge. Bunch of bandits and bar bouncers. Shouldn't be a problem. Obito told her, this is perfect, Rin. You're amazing, and then he took the scroll and started reading it. Where's this old guy from? In response to Obito's impatience, Rin rolled her eyes. She informed him even though the scroll stated as much if he only took 10 seconds to read it. Wave Country. The following day, Team 7 was taken aback to discover Obito waiting for them at the Hokage Tower. He teasingly said, you guys sure took your time. You're here early. Who are you and what have you done with Obito? Sensei? Naruto demanded as the three of them glared at him. Obito disregarded Naruto's inquiry. He informed them, we have a special mission today, which is why I'm here. He was a little excited about leaving the village for a mission. Despite his love for it, he was suffering from cabin fever. He needed to do something. Obito was still being glared at by dead eyes. Nothing about the missions they had been on was particularly noteworthy. Sasuke asked drearily, do we get to help babysit a couple of brats? Naruto added, or helping an old lady with her shopping? Don't be ridiculous, Obito. Sensei probably already took care of that, Sakura replied. It's probably more potato farming. To get their attention, Obito coughed in irritation. It's none of those things. Today we're going to get a C-rank mission. But I suppose if you guys want to do those other things I can see what they have, Obito quipped. The man was soon nearly bowled over by the outpouring of protests against the dreaded D-rank missions, and his genin did not let him down. All right. Enough. Wait for them to calm down before going into the specifics. It's an escort and protection mission that'll take us to Wave Country. We'll be escorting a bridge builder named Tazuna to a village in Wave Country and then protect him while he finishes building a bridge. The mission will take about a month, so pack accordingly. Meet at the gates in 30 minutes, dismissed. Eager to pack and get ready for their first C-rank mission, the genin nodded and then sped off to their homes. Thinking back to his own team's first C-rank, Obito grinned with laughter and made his way to the gates. There, he would wait for them and, ideally, have a conversation with their client. Then Obito noticed something significant. "Oh, miss. Do you need help with those bags? Gates of Konoha?" By the gates, an elderly man was sipping alcohol directly from the bottle. He wore dark clothing, a towel around his neck, and a pointed, wide-brimmed hat over his hair and gray beard. After examining Obito for a while, the elderly man asked, "Only one person?" Obito declared, "I'm a Jonin and my genin team will be here shortly," with a phony smile. This was going to be one of those clients, he knew. Oh well, the children would gain valuable experience in handling challenging clients. Talk about the devils, too, Obito said, right on time, to the genin. Each carried a pack of varying sizes on their backs. Sasuke's had a set of bedrolls and some cooking tools. Sakura's was bigger than the boys but seemed to be under less stress, and Naruto's appeared to have a lot of spiked objects and wire jammed into his. Obito was impressed. He was unaware that the necessary supplies had already been distributed among the three of them. He had intended to go over that with genin while they were preparing to camp for the night, as that was typically something that needed to be taught. But which of them had thought of it first? Obito said, "All right, Team 7. This is Tazuna. Tazuna, this is my genin team." Tazuna surveyed the children critically. "They're a bunch of brats. Are they really ninja?" he inquired. Obito's raised hand caused the genin to hold their tongues, despite their outrage at his insult. He let a hint of his desire to kill seep into his words, saying, "I can assure you that they are all very capable ninja and could easily kill you before you could blink. They'll be more than enough to handle your thug problem. And if they can't, I will." Although Tazuna was a little intimidated by Obito's tone and words, he refused to give the younger man the final say, saying, "For all the money Wave's paying they better be." He started to leave the village but was stopped by an invisible wall. What in the hell? Tazuna glared at the apparently empty space in front of him while clutching his nose in agony. Obito told him, "You can't leave until you talk to the gatekeepers," as he approached the little booth by the gates. He held up the mission scroll to the two men in the booth and said, "Jonin Uchiha Obito and Genin Team 7 escorting a client." Both men were identified as at least Chunin because they were dressed in Konoha uniforms. The man with the brown hair over his right eye and the bandana sewn over his forehead took the scroll and looked it over. The man reached down and produced a backpack, saying, "Obito-san, here is your pack. Good luck on your mission, kids. All right, you guys are good." The black-haired man waved at them, a small mark on his chin, a bandage over the bridge of his nose. "Try not to die on your first mission," he instructed in jest. They were then permitted to depart the village after the Chunin uncrossed his fingers. The man crossed his fingers again and resumed his slouching after they had passed the gates. Tazuna turned to Obito after he was certain they were out of earshot. He questioned, "What the hell was that?" "The gatekeepers. You had to pass them when you were making the mission request, so I don't see why you're surprised," Obito said, raising an eyebrow at him. "Yes, but that was to get into the village, not out of it. Why would you need to stop people from leaving? And what the hell did I run into?" Something hardened up in Obito's eyes. Not everything that wants to leave the village is harmless. We're shinobi. We tend to steal things that others don't want us to know about. Katetsu and Izumo are just one of the precautions that the Hokage put in place to prevent that. As for what you ran into, that was Katetsu's barrier. No one gets in or out of the gates unless he lets them. Tazuna rubbed his nose and complained a little, but he ignored it. Although he didn't care much about it, it appeared that the rumors of ninjas possessing magical abilities were accurate. What was the group he hired capable of doing? I'm hoping they'll be strong enough to resist Gato. A few days later so far, the mission had been fairly straightforward. Sasuke reportedly received advice from Itachi about how to plan and pack for extended missions, which he then shared with his teammates. Upon closer examination, it appeared that Itachi had also instructed Sasuke on how to pack Anbu style, packing all of the useful odds and ends into their bags. Team 7 had simply walked in a loose formation around Tazuna on the way to Wave Country, except for the inspection on the first night. The shinobi established a system of watch that included Sasuke, Naruto, Obito, and Sakura. Naruto had set snares to catch small animals that they ate on the way to conserve supplies. They had not encountered any other people while traveling, and no bandits had attempted to attack them. The genin were bored during this time because the thrill of leaving the village and embarking on a C-rank mission had faded. "This sucks," complained Naruto. "How much farther until we reach that shipping town?" Sakura took out their map and charted their route. "We aren't that far away from it. If we keep up our current pace we should reach it before nightfall," she said. "Perfect. We'll reserve a ship to carry us to Wave Country in the morning and spend the night in an inn," Obito replied. "No," Tazuna said grumpily. His mood had been deteriorating ever since he ran out of alcohol 2 days ago. Obito questioned suspiciously. Why not? Had their client omitted something from the description of the mission? Why were they unable to rent a car? Gado's men have the town locked down. No one gets in or out of Wave Country without his approval. Since I haven't exactly appealed myself to him, there's no way that we'll get passage to Wave Country, Tazuna said. Obito demanded, "You got across. How'd you do it?" "Gado was glad to see me gone. Probably thought I skipped town after my son.in.law was killed. He was glad to see me leave, but he'll try to kill me when he learns I'm back." "Then how did you expect to get back into Wave after you left?" replied Obito. That appeared to be a bridge builder's lack of planning. "By hiring a team of ninja to take care of Gado's goons." Obito sighed and halted his stride. It was exactly what they required. The others gave him a questioning glance. He gestured them to take a break. "We're taking our break here and use the time to plan." Sakura said, "Plan what, sensei?" Sasuke and Naruto both shook their heads aside from her. They were aware that he had been waiting for that question to be asked. Drama had always been Obito's thing. Plan to steal a boat to Wave Country. That evening, to watch the ships, a number of men were positioned throughout the pier. They had no idea why Gado insisted on having nighttime guards stationed everywhere. What was night fishing going to do in a sleepy town like this? They wouldn't do anything because Gado's operation already included any smugglers in the town. However, they were paid to stand around and appear dangerous in the middle of the night rather than to sleep, not to ask questions. Go. For what felt like the 100th time that night, one of the guards was idly looking around the pier when he noticed something strange. A tiny, blazing flame seemed to be drifting close to one of the boats. To make sure he was awake, he rubbed his eyes and then poked his finger on his sword. One of his fellow guards, who was stationed nearby, noticed that the flame was still present. "Hey, do you see a floating flame over there?" The other guard pivoted and glanced in the direction indicated by the first guard. The flame caught his attention, and he nodded, saying, "That little blue one? Yeah, I see it. I'm going to go check it out. Watch my back." The guard started toward the flame, and the second guard acknowledged with a wave of his hand. One of the lanterns started to sputter and eventually died while he was observing. He swore. The oil must have run out. After seeing how the other guard was doing, he moved toward the lantern. He walked straight into one of the shacks that lined the pier, not realizing that a noose made of ninja wire had been lowered over its edge. A shadowed figure fell over the side of the shack, and the wire was pulled taut over a protrusion on the roof before he could reach up to grab the line after feeling a tug around his neck. The guard was pulled from his feet and his air was cut off, causing him to choke. He felt the wound bleeding as he attempted to get his fingers under the wire, which was slicing into his skin. He reached for his knife, but it was kicked out of his hands by a foot. The man eventually became lethargic and ceased to move. Hanging behind the man's corpse on the other end of the wire, Sasuke remained motionless. He signaled for Sakura after waiting a few more seconds to make sure the guard was dead. She emerged from her hiding place and gave Sasuke the all clear using the sign language that was taught in the academy. She went beneath him and took the sack he was tied to after he signed back awkwardly with one hand. Sakura went beneath the guard's body, braced herself, and then nodded after Sasuke cut the rope. After releasing the kunai that the wire was fastened to, Sasuke hurried to assist Sakura in supporting the man's body. Sasuke swiftly retrieved the wire noose and kunai after they moved it into the shadows. They were not allowed to leave any trace. After that, the two sat down to wait for Naruto to indicate that his guard had been defeated. The first guard moved toward the fire. He was confident that Gado's threats had completely intimidated the villagers, so he wasn't in a rush. Because the night shift was so dull, he was mostly investigating. Upon approaching the boat, he discovered that, contrary to his initial assumption, the flame was over the water. He moved toward the flame, but as soon as he was 5 feet away, it started to move. The guard leveled his spear at it initially because he was suspicious. He cautiously moved closer to it after it stopped moving, but it stayed out of his grasp. The guard started testing the flame after determining it wasn't harmful. He found that if he attempted to approach the flame within 5 feet, it always stayed out of reach. Captured by the hypnotic glow of the flame, the guard kept chasing it. Even the figure coming up behind him went unnoticed. The flame abruptly ceased its motion and drifted to the floor. Without hesitation, the guard crouched to inspect the flame that had been diverting his attention. This made it simple for the person behind him to stoop beside him and slit his throat with a kunai. With a strangled gurgle, the guard gripped his throat to stop the blood flow, but it was too late. The figure fell beside him as he was carefully lowered the remaining distance to the ground so as not to create any noise. Naruto wiped the perspiration from his brow and panted heavily. It had been the most difficult use of his abilities he had ever attempted. It took a lot of energy to keep his foxfire under control and fool the other guards. Luckily, it had only been a static illusion that affected their sight and hearing. If the guards had gotten angry, he couldn't have continued. Before dropping the flame and the illusions, Naruto sent it back into the air and caused it to flicker 7 times. He just needed to wait for the others to arrive. Since his entire body hurt and he wouldn't be able to move it himself, he hoped they would arrive soon. He would simply rest against this post and catch his breath until then. After noticing Naruto's signal, Sakura and Sasuke both took action. Sakura had already thrown everything else into the water and deprived the guard of anything that could be of any use. Without being discovered, the two of them carried the body to Naruto's location. Upon their arrival, they discovered Naruto leaning his head against a post. Sakura let out a startled gasp and let her end of the body fall. Both genin froze, their hearts lodged in their throats as it made a dull thud. They cautiously went up to Naruto after realizing that no one was coming to look into it. The closest was Sasuke, who calmed down after catching a better glimpse of Naruto. He gently lowered the body and gave Sakura a signal that everything was okay. After grabbing the guard's spear, he jabbed Naruto in the butt. No answer. Sasuke scowled. He could hear Naruto's breathing and see his chest rising, indicating that he was still alive. Why did he not respond? Like himself, Sasuke was aware that Naruto had been trained to awaken at the first sign of trouble. What was the matter with him? Was he under the influence of drugs? A gentle two-note whistle sounded behind Sasuke before his mind could start to conjure up all the possible problems with his friend. The Uchiha could not help but flinch at being caught so easily, even though he knew the signal. When Sasuke turned around, Sakura and Obito were standing behind him. Before indicating to Sasuke to assist Sakura in placing their own body in the boat they were stealing, the Jonin placed the one he was carrying inside. When Obito indicated that he would examine Naruto, he complied. Obito approached Naruto and, just in case, checked his vitals out of the other two's line of sight. Nothing was wrong with him, and Obito came to the conclusion that his first suspicion, that Naruto had overused his abilities and worn himself out, was accurate. After putting the body in the boat, he signaled for Sakura to begin removing anything valuable from it and for Sasuke to bring Naruto in. However, he changed the order when he saw Sakura's fear at seeing so much blood. As she assisted Naruto in getting into the boat, the pinkette gave him a relieved glance. The Konoha ninja silently departed the pier to collect Tazuna after Obito swiftly phased the boat through its moorings. The country coast wave in order to enter the country in silence, Obito turned off the engine and raised a rowing oar. 2 days ago, after picking up Tazuna, they had left the coast of Fire Country and disposed of the guards' bodies in a location far from the town where they would not be discovered. After recovering for the majority of the day and night, Naruto was remarkably quiet. Obito made the decision to speak with them about their first kill that evening because Sasuke was too. He had been a little taken aback to hear that they had already had the kill talk with their parents and were simply struggling to deal with the truth. Before giving them time to consider it, he could only reiterate that killing them was necessary and that it would protect their clients and teammates. Even though his first kill was never pleasant, he still recalled it as a necessary experience and one of the reasons he had brought them on this mission. He hoped that when Sakura killed, it would be during a fight when she was high on adrenaline and he would have time to talk to her about it later, before the full extent of what she had done caught up with her. Sakura was the only member of the team without a kill. Obito successfully maneuvered the boat into the small fishing village under Tazuna's guidance without making any noise. After they all got out of the boat, Obito had Sasuke light it on fire before letting it float back into the sea. Since the bridge would have been constructed by the time the mission was over, there would be no possibility of anyone locating and reporting the missing boat, and they wouldn't require it. Obito observed his genin's attempt to focus and avoid staring. It was both thrilling and disheartening because this was most likely the first time any of them had visited another village. Every stall was terribly overpriced and in poor condition. Many of them were begging or offering to take any job, and they were dressed in shabby clothing that was more akin to rags. They didn't make the best first impression. "Where do you live?" Obito asked Tazuna as he approached her. Obito's voice startled the elderly man out of his reverie as he watched the villagers with a sorrowful expression in his eyes. He shook his head slightly prior to speaking. "This way. I live with my daughter and grandson outside of the village. We have plenty of room and you can stay there at night. I'll start getting word out to the workers that I'm back and brought your four for protection, and we'll probably be able to start work in a day or two." After Obito gave a nod, the five started moving through the throng. Occasionally, Tazuna would pause and speak with specific individuals, extending greetings and sharing the news of the bridge's continuation. However, a number of the villagers mumbled their greetings and refused to look directly at the man who was meant to give them new hope instead of cheerfully greeting him. As this went on, Tazuna became restless. His conversations became harsher and shorter, and he kept saying, "Something's wrong," under his breath. They finally found a man who was prepared to answer them directly. "I'm sorry, Tazuna. I'm so very sorry," a man on a bar stool named Gichi said to him. 2 bottles were already empty near his location. "What happened, Gichi? No one's willing to look me in the eyes or give me a straight answer. What happened while I was gone?" Tazuna asked. Gichi finished his 3rd bottle before continuing. "Gato decided that he wasn't satisfied that you had left Wave Country. He figured that there was a chance you'd come back. He sent his 2 best thugs to your house to take Tsunami hostage. From what we can tell, Inari must have been home and heard the men break in and went down to see what the noise was." Gichi reached out and grabbed Tazuna's shoulder, saying, "I'm so sorry, Tazuna. We didn't find out until we noticed that Tsunami wasn't coming to buy food and," before he trailed off, unsure of what to say. "Gato made an announcement after we found out that he had taken Tsunami. Said that if you came back to tell you what had happened and that he'd let her go in exchange for you." Tazuna was swaying, and Obito saw it and seized him before he could fall. When he saw the look of destruction on the man's face, he gritted his teeth and assisted him onto a bar stool. After hearing the news about his family, he appeared to have aged by another 50 years. Obito couldn't hold it against him. He felt his own nails through his gloves, his fists clenched so tightly. He could see from his students that Sasuke was fighting back tears as flames danced through his hair and his hands were making the countertop smoke, while Naruto and Sakura were crying openly. Through his tears, Tazuna finally questioned, "Where?" "We buried Inari next to his father. As for Tsunami, Gato's got her at his place. All you've got to do is knock on the door," he was told. After inhaling deeply, Tazuna stood up. "If you go there he'll kill you," Gichi yelled as he was heading out. "Better me than her," the stern reply went. Tazuna.san, "Wait," Obito signaled after their customer. Glaring at the younger man, Tazuna demanded, "What? Are you going to try and stop me from saving my daughter?" "Forget it," he said, reaching into one of his pockets and thrusting some cash into Obito's chest. "Here's your pay, now leave." Obito seized Tazuna's shoulder with an iron grip as he attempted to flee, saying, "We can't do that yet, Tazuna.san. Our mission is to protect you until your bridge is done. If you're going to go off and try to get yourself killed, then we'll simply have to stop you from getting killed." "How? I won't do anything until I'm sure Tsunami's safe. You can keep me from going to Gato's, but you can't make me work," he insisted. "In that case we'll just have to save your daughter then." Tazuna was stunned by Obito's remarks. He glanced at the 3 children behind him and the man in front of him. Their expressions were all the same. Determined. He couldn't figure out why. He had been nothing but a drunken ass for the majority of that time, and these people hardly knew him. Why had they traveled so far? However, who was he to scrutinize a gift? "Thank you," Tazuna cried, his face starting to well up with new tears. "Thank you so much." "It's our job," pointed out Obito. "Naruto, Sasuke, remember those stories I used to tell you about saving princesses when you were kids?" the Jonin asked, turning to his genin. "You mean the ones that Kakashi.Oji would always interrupt to correct the details?" Naruto responded. "Yes," Obito gritted his teeth and said. "Did he need to mention that now? Would you 3 like to try rescuing a princess?" Before responding on behalf of everyone, Naruto glanced between Sakura's enraged expression, which he was certain matched his own, and Sasuke's stoic face with fire in his eyes. Hell yeah. The mansion of Gato. While scouting Gato's mansion, Obito drummed his fingers silently on the binoculars. When Tazuna claimed that Gato had an army, he wasn't joking. Just outside, Obito noticed several four-man patrols moving about. Sasuke had also mentioned that his side had similar patrols. At least one man was constantly keeping watch behind them, and they all overlapped. When it came to his security, Gato was not taking any chances. About 30 minutes ago, Obito also saw a man who he thought was from the village arrive. He and his 4 Konoha symbol wearing companions were most likely reporting Tazuna's return. Wonderful. Obito said into his earpiece, Sasuke, report. Nothing new over here. Do you want me to get a look inside? I can see a chimney, replied the genin. After giving it some thought, Obito decided against it. Too risky. We're falling back to meet up with the others, he said. After putting his binoculars back in his pack, Obito fell to the ground in silence. With the ease of one who had grown up in a forest, he navigated the trees that surrounded Gato's place. He hurried to meet Sasuke, and the two of them headed back to Tazuna's house. In the prearranged knock, Obito rapped on the door and waited. Password? Naruto's voice said as it entered the room. Will of fire. The door cracked open, revealing a blue eye, and there was the sound of a lock being taken out. Naruto swung the door open the remaining distance, satisfied with what he saw. Welcome back. Any luck? Obito said, about as much as Tsunade. Sama's, as the Uchihas entered. He glanced back curiously at Sakura, emerging from behind makeshift cover with a crossbow in her hand. Nice crossbow. Where'd you find it? Sakura hefted the weapon on her back and said, I thought it might be useful. It was in one of the rooms we searched. We put the rest of the stuff we found on the kitchen table. Obito smiled proudly at her and asked, good. Where's Tazuna? Grimacing, Sakura said, under the table. Obito combed his hair with his hand. That was about as far as he could go. The man's home country was struggling economically, and a despotic merchant had taken his daughter and killed his grandson. He had increased his drinking, as was to be expected. To review their plan, Obito signaled for everyone to gather in the kitchen. A number of potentially helpful objects that Sakura and Naruto had discovered strewn about the house while watching over Tazuna were spread out on the table. A big net, a pair of fishing rods, a few knives, hooks, and fishing line were all present. Additionally, Obito wasn't willing to rely on the alcohol remaining for long after the man woke up, even though Tazuna hadn't been able to finish it. It was not much, but it was enough for them. Flares, ninja wire, senbon, smoke bombs, a pair of Fuma shuriken, some bear traps Naruto had brought, and the standard caltrops, kunai, and shuriken carried by all ninja were all from their own supplies. How had Naruto crammed all of that into his bag, Sage? To make room to draw a rough outline of Gato's mansion, Obito pushed enough of the weapons aside. This is Gato's place. He's got a patrol of 4 men on each side of the house that are watching each other's backs from all sides and a small army of mercs inside the mansion. We also saw a man from the village go into the mansion, so Gato probably knows that we're here, Sasuke said. Sakura swallowed uneasily as Naruto blew an impressed whistle. There were a lot of men to battle. Sakura inquired, so where's Tsunami-san at? No idea. We couldn't get a closer look without risking setting off the guards, replied Obito. We're probably only going to get one shot at this. Until we reveal ourselves, Tazuna can claim that he sent us back to Konoha after learning about Tsunami. Will that work? If it doesn't, then Tsunami's dead and the mission's a bust, Obito said quite bluntly. There's no use in skirting the issue. He remarked, of course, we won't know that our client will refuse to work on the bridge until after Gato's dead, after observing the expressions on his team's faces. They had been burning inside to hold Gato accountable for his actions ever since they discovered a photograph of Inari. At their age, people tended to do that when they learned that someone just a few years younger than you had been wrongfully killed. It simply changed from a few years younger to that young, but it persisted even as you grew older. Gato was dead regardless of the outcome of this mission. Even though it wasn't professional, Minato Sensei couldn't punish you for what he didn't know. Naruto questioned, so how are we going to do this? Very, very carefully, said Obito. We don't know where Tsunami is, the layout of Gato's mansion, or what his total manpower is. With an army of mercs that large, there should be at least one devil fruit user in the batch, and with Gato's money there's a good chance that there'll be more than that. In case we do run into some devil fruit users, take these. Obito opened the pocket of his vest and pulled out 3 kunai. I was going to save them as a reward for completing your first C-rank mission, but now is more appropriate. He distributed them. These are sea stone edged blades. Hardest stuff in the world. The edges won't dull and they'll cut any crazy devil fruit power you guys come across. The kunai caught the attention of the 3 genin. Even getting 3 kunai edged in the stuff must have cost Obito a lot of money because sea stone wasn't cheap. The 3 picked up the weapons with care and looked them over. Naruto and Sasuke took extra care to avoid coming into contact with the blade. They had previously encountered the unpleasant effects of sea stone. To avoid confusion, the 3 put the kunai in a separate pocket from their regular kunai and thanked Obito for the gift. Obito ran a hand through his hair in frustration, satisfied with how his team responded to his gift. I only see one option here and it sucks. This plan really didn't sit well with him. We're going to do a snatch dot and grab then lead them into a briar patch. The genin gave Obito a startled look. They were anticipating something a bit more intricate than such a straightforward plan. As he went on to describe his strategy, they began to wish it had been much more intricate. Tazuna swigged from his bottle nervously. Obito had told him the plan after he had awoken from his drunken stupor. Despite his disapproval of the plan, it was the only way the ninja he had hired would attempt to save his daughter. He looked at the man who was walking next to him. Though Tazuna knew better, the picture of a young man from the village with a scar across his nose was incredibly realistic. His hand would go straight through anything above the man's stomach if he attempted to touch him. Behind him, there should have been another child, but the other one had already left with their leader. He was walking to Gato's place, pretty much by himself. They were now approaching Gato's residence. Tazuna put his bottle away after finishing it. For what had likely been his final drink, it hadn't been too bad. At the boundary of Gato's land, the 2 came to a halt and waited. With 2 bodyguards at his sides, Gato emerged from his mansion as the doors opened. When Tazuna saw them, her teeth clenched. The short weasel in front of them gave them instructions to kill the one who killed his son. He started to move forward, but was stopped by a hand. He looked at the illusion beside him and scowled at the location of the brat's head, which he knew to be there. "Stick to the plan," he said. Tsunami would have died if he hadn't maintained his composure. Tazuna took a step back, clenching even more. Ninjas are skilled at what they do. Across the yard he shouted, "I'm here, Gato, now where's my daughter?" Gato's sultry voice said, "Hello, Tazuna," as though they were sipping tea. "I'm so glad that you decided to come back to your hometown. But where are the friends you brought with you?" "I fired them when I heard your deal. They won't be a problem," Tazuna responded with ease. Before he left, Obito had given him a briefing on what to say. "Then what about the man next to you? I don't recall telling you to bring company." "I brought him to make sure that my daughter got back safely. Can you blame me for not trusting you?" Tazuna's tone became raspy. "Now show her to me or I'm heading back to build my bridge." Gato gave the guard on his right a snap of his fingers. He vanished back into the mansion and then resurfaced with a young woman with long blue hair in tow. Although she had a number of noticeable scratches and bruises, nothing severe was apparent. "You know the deal. She goes free in exchange for you." Tazuna was nudged by Naruto. Tazuna remarked, "I want to make sure that she's okay first." Gato gave a snort. Taking hold of Tsunami's shoulder, he pushed her forward. "Say something to daddy, girl. Let him know you're all right." Looking at her father, Tsunami raised her head. Clear tear ducts ran down her cheeks where the dirt had been washed away, and her eyes were red and puffy from crying. When she saw him, she started crying. She turned and tried to stab the guard who was holding her with a sharp rock after saying, "I'm sorry, Dad. But Wave needs you." For Tazuna, time seemed to slow down. He failed to notice Naruto pushing him backwards and dropping the illusion next to him. He didn't shout the code word in case something went wrong, and he didn't hear it. He was unable to feel the tears streaming down his cheeks or even his own knees going down. He was powerless to stop the guard from drawing his sword and slaying his daughter. Similar to his son.in.law. Similar to his grandson. Then Tsunami was still alive, but the guard had lost his head. With an odd weapon that resembled 2 sickles fastened by a chain, Obito had hurried out of the mansion and killed the guard who was about to murder his girl. A pair of fireballs were hurled at Gato as he ran towards the shinobi, who now held his girl. He ignored the pink-haired girl who was standing next to Tazuna, pulling on his shoulder, shouting something, and brandishing an empty crossbow. All that mattered to him was that his daughter was safe. Sakura yelled at Tazuna, "You've got to fall back," but the man was not answering. She attempted to pull him back, but he was too heavy for her strength, and she was only able to get him to bend slightly back. She dismissed it as futile and turned to face the mansion just as a torrent of flames shaped like a fist erupted through the front of the house and all the windows blew out in a wave of fire. The ninja and guards outside were briefly halted to observe Gato's house engulfed in flames as a wave of heat swept over them. Obito excluded. Since he was the one who ordered the blast, The Jonin had been anticipating it and had witnessed more spectacular things than a Logia user demolishing a mansion. He continued to move. Fall back, he yelled at Naruto, who was in his hybrid form with his hands covering his face to shield himself from the heat, without pausing his stride. Obito was sure he would listen, so he started running more quickly. When Tsunami decided she wanted to make a noble sacrifice, the entire plan went straight to hell. After she was killed by Gado's thugs, what did she anticipate happening? Was her father, who was getting old and unfit, going to outrun skilled samurai and construct his bridge? She had witnessed the sheer number of people in Gado's mansion. 2 days for Tazuna would be generous. Obito put the woman back on her feet and said, "Sakura, help Naruto with Tsunami. I'll take Tazuna and we'll meet up with Sasuke again at their house." He began pushing Tazuna forward after hefting him to his feet. When he looked back to see how Gado and his men were doing, he discovered Naruto engaged in a losing battle with both guards. Obito wasted no time wondering why Naruto had ignored him or how the lone man had escaped his attack. With the chain of his Kusarigama clinking behind him, he hurried back at the men assaulting his student after telling Sakura to defend their client. It was clear that the 2 guards were devil fruit users. The shirtless one with the tattoos and eye patch was trying to immobilize Naruto by calling thorny plants out of the ground, and Obito was aware that he had severed the head of the one with the hat and jacket when he had saved Tsunami. Obito could see Naruto's clothing was stained with blood, but the blonde genin was holding his own against his 2 opponents. He had likely only survived so long because he continued to hurl fireballs at the 2 to keep them at bay. But Naruto was exhausted by each fireball, and he couldn't endure it indefinitely. To keep the person wearing the hat from approaching Naruto too closely, Obito threw one of his blades. He almost got clawed as he shifted to stand next to Naruto. Naruto gave Obito a startled look. He yelled, "Obito! Sensei!" far louder than he had to. "I can't hear." The mansion had exploded in a fireball while Naruto was in his hybrid form, leaving behind a ringing sound that persisted. Before he could get it checked out, he was attacked by the 2 guards. They weren't particularly skilled fighters, but he was unable to hear what was happening, and the ringing would divert his attention, causing him to get cut. Although fortunately nothing significant had happened, Naruto didn't like how often it had come close. He could feel his strength ebbing with each of the fireballs he had been hurling, though they might have been useful in the short term. He was lucky that Obito had returned to assist him at that time. Naruto shouted at Obito, "What do we do now?" Before confronting his opponent, the Jonin demonstrated a number of hand signals that Naruto had learned in the academy. With a shout of understanding, Naruto transformed into a full-fledged fox. Obito was left alone with the 2 guards when Naruto fled into the woods after his opponent's blade went through where his head had been. When the eye-patched guard tried to pursue Naruto, one of Obito's blades almost severed his head. "Can't have you chasing after my student like that, can I?" Obito chided. With a frustrated snort, the guard returned his focus to the shinobi with the black hair. Obito smiled as he started to circle the 2 guards with his lethal dance. He believed that they were former samurai from the Land of Iron because of their swordplay prowess and devil fruit possession. He might be able to get them to tell him the precise powers of their fruit if they were samurai. After kicking one man back and locking both swords, Obito unlocked his second blade and ducked out of the way. The guard staggered forward without Obito's resistance, leaving himself vulnerable to a kick that sent him crashing into his fellow guard. Obito remarked nonchalantly, "You know, you guys are pretty bad samurai," grinning to himself at the way his opponents retaliated against him. Therefore, they did retain their sense of honor. "Excellent. I mean, you haven't even introduced yourselves." Before adjusting their battle stances, the 2 samurai exchanged irritated glances. "I ate the bara. Bara no mi," the person wearing the hat said. "My name is Zori." "I ate the odoro. Odoro no mi," the person with the eye patch said. "My name is Waraji." When Waraji growled at him, Obito said, "That's a pretty fancy devil fruit you have there, Zori." "Waraji, yours kinda sucks," smiling. "If you know what my devil fruit is, then you know that you have no chance against me with those kusarigamas of yours," Zori said with assurance. "Why don't you give up and let us cut up that old geezer and his daughter?" Even though Zori and Waraji were seasoned mercenaries who had engaged in numerous skirmishes with opponents who were self-assured in their abilities and had eliminated them all, they had never encountered a man who had the gall to make fun of them like Obito. The man was hunched over from lack of oxygen and was busting a guy across from them, so it wasn't a light laugh either. The bastard's eyes were even filled with fucking tears. I'm sorry, I forgot that I haven't introduced myself yet," Obito said after he had recovered enough to breathe. His blades were aimed at their heads, and suddenly he was standing in front of them, grinning wickedly. "My name is Obito Uchiha, Jonin of Konoha and the eater of the Mitsudo. Mitsudo no am I. Nice to meet ya." As they attempted to keep them fastened to their necks, Waraji and Zori's faces turned white. From the bingo book, they were aware of Obito's reputation as Obito the Untouchable. An opponent of his caliber was too strong for them to handle. Nobody was around to spread the word that they had quit their job, and Gato's money wasn't worth dying for. The two samurai fled for the hills after Waraji threw up a wall of thorns to conceal their retreat. Unfortunately for them, rather than running away as they had assumed, Naruto had sneaked back around behind them. A pair of fireballs pointed directly at their faces as the blonde shinobi signaled his arrival. To try to extinguish the flames, the samurai pawed at their faces and screamed in agony. Naruto quickly stabbed Waraji with his kunai before he had a chance to try. The older man sagged forward onto Naruto, his arms letting go. Before his jacket caught fire, the blonde swiftly let him drop to the side. Zori was able to contain the majority of the fireball on his hat and extinguish the remaining flames on his face after taking it off. "You'll pay for that, you little bastard," he roared in rage as he pulled out his sword and glared daggers at Naruto. Despite turning to face him, Naruto was caught off guard when Zori's arm detached, and he was only able to make a hurried attempt at a block with his kunai. Before the kunai could stop it, the sword sliced through Naruto's side, causing the genin to hiss in agony. Naruto was suddenly at a disadvantage when he attempted to combat a floating sword that could strike him from any direction. Zori grinned as he observed from a safe distance. Since they had been samurai training in the Land of Iron, Waraji had been Zori's partner. "Dance, you little fuck, dance." After Zori had discovered his devil fruit in his backpack and their leader had passed away, he had assisted in taking down the other member of their squad. This small matter would be the price of his death because he had been a wonderful friend. As his sword outwitted Naruto and slashed him across the back, he grinned. Blood would be the blonde's price. Zori experienced an odd pain in his chest as his body jerked. To his surprise, a solid black blade protruded from his chest when he looked down. Before realizing that his arms were missing, he reached up to touch the blade. "Huh," he muttered in a daze as he saw his jacket stained with blood. He then collapsed onto his back after the blade was torn from his chest. After wiping the blood from his blade, Obito wound the chain around himself. Having to cut through the thicket that Waraji had thrown down had not pleased him in the first place, and watching Zori play with Naruto had not made him feel any better. He turned to see Naruto kicking the still arms on the ground in front of him with hesitation. He turned back to see Obito standing over Zori's body, satisfied that they would not be moving anytime soon. Then Obito said, "Naruto, can you hear me?" With hope. "What?" In defeat, Obito hung his head. It couldn't be that simple, of course. He gave Naruto permission to take the bodies and return to Sakura. Obito turned to go to Gato's mansion and locate the man after he nodded in comprehension. With all the fighting, he had lost sight of him. Obito discovered a blood trail leading away from the flaming structure once he arrived at the front of the mansion's remnants. Before long, Gato was crawling across the ground with a crossbow bolt protruding from his leg. He must have been shot by Sakura before the battle began. Fearfully, Gato glanced up at Obito. Help me. I can give you anything. Money, women, land, whatever you want. I can double whatever that old man is paying. Triple it. Just don't let me die," Gato pleaded. Obito regarded him with disdain. Based on the amount of blood, Gato's femoral artery was struck by the arrow. He had already passed away. The man grinned greasy at Obito as he knelt beside Gato. Gato's excitement waned when Obito failed to pick him up or even glance at the wound. "Yes, excellent. You take me to get healed and then we'll come back to make these peasants pay for this." Rather, he was searching his pockets. "What the hell is the meaning of this? Help me, you bastard." Obito didn't even turn to face Gato. He casually said out loud, "It's standard ninja procedure to loot a corpse after every fight if you have a chance," as he took out Gato's wallet and checkbook. "Just doing my job." Gato started cursing Obito and calling him all sorts of derogatory names. The Jonin accepted it and proceeded to search Gato for anything valuable. Gato was left screaming and bleeding in the dirt as Obito got up and brushed himself off after snatching a nice gold watch that he could definitely sell for a good price. Obito paused in front of the mansion and gave it a worried glance. Sasuke was still not out, the fire was still burning fiercely, and anything valuable that wasn't locked in a safe was completely destroyed. "Hey, Sasuke, you in there?" Obito cupped his hands around his mouth and waited for a few seconds without receiving a response. With a curse to himself, Obito circled the building to where Sasuke had entered. He would never be able to forgive himself for the brief period of time he would have had before being killed by Itachi or Makoto if his cousin had been injured during his first C-ranked mission. Never would Fugaku do it on his own. As the leader of the clan, he had just placed his severed head on a pike outside his window and in front of the police station to observe Obito's head gradually rotting. This side of the mansion was much more damaged, and Obito cautiously navigated the flaming rubble. He discovered Sasuke sitting in the center of the mansion, his eyes distant and surrounded by flames. Obito cautiously called out, "Hey, Sasuke," in his most composed tone. Despite not looking at him, the genin turned to face him. That was far from his gaze. "What's wrong?" Sasuke whispered, "I killed them," very faintly. To illustrate, Sasuke snapped his fingers. There were so many of them and they just burned. "I can smell them burning, hear them screaming in pain. They didn't even see it coming and I wiped them out like that," he said. Tears started streaming down his cheeks, washing away the soot that covered them. "That's crazy." Such things were not new to Obito. The extent of Logia's and some Paramecia devil fruit eaters' power overwhelms them. In order to speak with an advisor shortly, he had to return Sasuke to Konoha. Sasuke was actually staring at him now, his eyes terrified. "That's your power, Sasuke. With it you're one of the strongest ninja in the village right now." He needed assurance that everything would be alright. Obito approached Sasuke and placed his hands on his shoulders, saying, "What you just did was amazing. You saved Tazuna, Tsunami, Naruto, Sakura, and myself. You saved us and you saved the mission." To the touch, they were warm. "You killed people, yes, but you saved the important ones. Don't think about how many random thugs you killed. Think about how many of your friends you saved. Your friends and comrades are more important than anyone else in the world. They're worth over 1,000 grunts like that each. Now, want to go back and see your friends that you saved?" Sasuke's large, terrified eyes were still fixed on Obito, but they weren't as intense as they had been. With hesitation, he extended a hand to Obito and said, "Yes." Obito said, "Good man," and pulled him to his feet. He started guiding them through the house. After the fire was extinguished, he would return to plunder the location. I hope Gato stored his valuables in a safe that wouldn't catch fire. Gato's mansion's remains. While the rest of Team 7 cleaned up the mess from their altercation with Gato, Sakura had led Tazuna and Tsunami back to their house. Because of his immunity to them and primarily so that he wouldn't have to face the devastation he had caused, Obito had given Sasuke the task of clearing out every trap they had left in the woods. "What are we looking for here, Obito?" "Sensei. Everything's burnt," Naruto said, cautiously avoiding the corpses as he made his way through the house. He wasn't even changed, and the stench was rather awful. "Sasuke didn't burn the mansion down, just this part of it. Everything else will be fine, but we need to see if there's anything salvageable here," Obito informed him. He was searching through the bodies, and the burned corpses were nothing new to him. They might have been carrying a useful weapon or two, but any money they had on them would be worthless. "If you find anything, throw it in a pile out front." Despite his grimace at having to approach the corpses, Naruto did as he was told. Weapons that had been slightly burned started to pile up. Spears and axes with wooden shafts were useless, but they were added because a blacksmith could melt down the metal. A few pieces of armor were also present, but neither shinobi wanted to check to see if the metal had fused to the flesh of the wearer. They proceeded to the areas of the mansion that were not on fire after finishing that. Obito went to the right, while Naruto went to the left. There wasn't much there that they could use. Expensive ceramics and paintings were nice, but they weren't exactly the best treasure for those who lived their lives killing and fighting. The majority of the items in the rooms were items that the general public would find useful, such as clothing, furniture, books, and artwork. Nothing helpful. Frustrated, Naruto kicked open the next door. Regardless of how far away the books were from the flames, he was holding Sasuke accountable for what happened to them if this was just another goddamn study. He was welcomed inside by a big four-poster bed with a picture of Gato on the other side. "Jackpot," he said, grinning foxy. He found a lot of extra cash lying around, most of it stuffed into the mattress, so a quick search of the room turned out to be quite profitable. Naruto cheerfully pocketed some extremely gaudy jewelry that was kept in a drawer. Gold was gold. A huge safe built into the wall was the true prize. Gato had spent a lot of money on this safe. Naruto recalled it from the class on safecracking. Filled under, "Don't even bother trying." It was the most sophisticated model available, and since there was no gap between it and the concrete, Gato must have had a support pillar for the mansion port around it. Activating his earpiece, he said, "Hey, Obito, sensei. I found a safe." Instead, Obito jumped through the wall and almost gave him a heart attack while he waited for a response. When the Jonin saw the kunai Naruto had thrown at him, he rolled his eyes. "A little jumpy, are we?" Naruto clutched his chest and yelled, "Sage of the Six Paths, don't do that. I almost put a kunai in your skull." Should his heartbeat resemble that of a hummingbird? Was that typical? Ignoring him, Obito looked at the safe instead. He began to whistle. "Yeah, this is pretty heavy duty. You need a master safecracker to break this bad boy. So, can you crack it?" Obito made a sweeping gesture with his hand. "Naruto, I am a Jonin of Konoha, the greatest village in the elemental nations. I have completed more S-rank missions that you can count. I am a veteran of the Third Shinobi War. I managed to convince Rin Nohara to be my wife. I will be the 5th Hokage after your dad retires, and you're asking me if I can crack a measly safe?" he abruptly concluded. Naruto asked boredly, Yeah, you're so awesome. So, can you crack it or what?" Obito must be spending too much time with that odd man in the green jumpsuit who was constantly shouting things at Kakashi.og. His mother warned him about the man, saying that 2 of them would be sufficient and that he was a negative influence on impressionable children. "Watch and learn," said Obito. He approached the safe without even attempting to open it. Instead, he pushed it back, causing it to tumble from the pillar and collide with an object below. He snatched up all the documents, cash, and ostensibly pricey items that were left in a tidy little safe. Shaped aperture. Naruto muttered, "Paramisha bullshit," behind him, but Obito ignored it and walked out of the room, saying, "All right, I think that's it." They still needed to divide up this loot with Sakura and Sasuke. A stack of their trapping materials was positioned next to their weapons pile, and Sasuke was waiting for them outside. Sakura was looking at some of the unfamiliar weapons on the pile when she returned while they were rifling through the house. With a wave of his hand, Obito said, "Yo." Sasuke did not respond to them. Instead, he looked up from his vacant gaze on the ground. He had to take that kid back to Konoha to see a shrink. He would need to discuss with Tazuna the possibility of shortening the mission. Gado's death shouldn't cause any more problems. Sakura said, "Hello, Obito. Sensei," in return. She pointed to where their backpacks had been placed aside and said, "I dropped Tazuna and Tsunami off at the village doctor. Word was spreading pretty fast that Gado and his men are dead. I stopped off at his house to grab our bags, just in case." Without noticing, Obito remarked, "Good work, Sakura." He expected that to occur. After verifying by scuttling out of the woodwork, they would begin pillaging the location. They had no intention of staying for that. With a slightly too broad smile, Naruto swiftly raised the man's sword and said, "Okay, kids, time to learn how to loot the bodies. First things first, you kill them, you get first pick of their stuff. Naruto, you got Waraji, so his stuff is yours. Well, Kushina had that issue. Sakura, you actually killed Gado, so that's yours," Obito said, tossing a bag at Sakura. "The rings might be a bit big though." In shock, Sakura grabbed the bag out of reflex. Was she listening to Obito? "Sensei correctly? I killed Gado?" Obito indistinctly indicated the location where he had left Gado. "Yep, got his femoral artery. He bled out over there somewhere," he said. It's best to divert Sakura's attention before the guilt of, "I just killed a man," sets in. In front of a group of villagers, he didn't want her to have to deal with that. Sakura's mind was paralyzed. She was unsure of how she should respond to that. She had completely forgotten everything the academy teachers had taught her. "I was aiming for his head," was all she could manage. Obito kicked the pile of weapons and said, "Sasuke, you've got the pick of this stuff, see anything you like." Dutifully, Sasuke gazed at the weapons. A weapon wasn't really necessary for him. There were no moves in the Mera no Mi scroll that integrated weapons into the styles of its previous users. The Uchiha clan's arsenal had better items than a heap of trash from a group of mercenaries, even if he was looking for a weapon. In addition, he could see that most of those weapons were burned from his attack. "I'm good." Obito gave a shoulder shrug. That's what he assumed. With the exception of Zori and Waraji's swords, the majority of the weapons were inexpensive. Anyone else? No. Okay. Let's start packing this stuff up. We don't want some random villager cutting their hand off because we left a pointy stick lying around. The genin hurried to stuff their bags as full as they could. Naruto's bag contained the majority of the trapping supplies, while Sakura's bag contained the remainder. Obito filled some empty pockets on his vest, which he kept ready for such occasions, with all of the cash, jewelry, and other items from the safe. His and Sasuke's bags were filled with weapons that still had their sheaths, while the items that were too large or would puncture the bags were tied to the outside. Sakura discovered that her pineapple had changed when she opened the fruit pocket of her bag while they were packing up. It was covered in spirals and had turned an orangish-red color. She summoned Obito and presented him with the devil fruit. The older man examined it and rubbed his chin. "We'll check it out when we get back and find out who gets it then." He returned the fruit to her before continuing to chop off the heads of the dead samurai. "I have no idea if this is the Bara. Bara no mi, Odoro. Odoro no mi, or if it's a completely different devil fruit from one of the mercenaries Sasuke killed." The price on their heads was not much, but a bounty was a bounty, and he had discovered them in the bingo book. The four ninja appeared to be a walking armory when everything was said and done, and many weapons were still scattered about. In the case of a great sword, they were custom items, such as a pair of strange blades that appeared to be strapped to the wielder's forearms or simply too big to be transported. They simply had to hope that the villagers weren't fools after the weapons were pushed into the ground point first. Hopefully, their blacksmith would take care of that while he was still alive. The ninja set out for Tezuna's home, laden with their loot. Gates of Konoha. As Team 7 saw the big gates of Konoha appear down the path, their spirits lifted. The death of Gato and his thugs had thrilled Tezuna, who had been more than happy to call off the mission early. It would have been a waste to keep them around since he no longer required protection. Before leaving to take part in the festivities, Tezuna and Tsunami paid them and expressed their sincere gratitude for saving their village. After they left, Obito separated the mission's loot from the looting. Konoha received 15%, Obito received 30%, and the genin divided the remaining 55% among themselves. They would receive a summons after the weapons and jewelry were delivered to the Hokage Tower for evaluation. Then, depending on the evaluation of the pieces, they would be free to choose among themselves who received what, up to a certain amount. They would receive payment for the remaining amount of their share of the loot, and anything they didn't want would remain with the village. The database that Konoha had created and provided to the rightful owner would be used to determine which devil fruit Sakura had discovered. Later, though, that was a headache. After reporting to the Hokage, Obito had to drop Sasuke off at his house, explain to Fugaku and Makoto why their youngest son needed to attend therapy following his first C-rank mission, write his official mission report, explain to Kushina how Naruto got his new toy, and ensure that his genin's mission reports looked good. Yes, now that he thinks about it, Naruto could tell his parents about his new sword. For now, he had enough on his plate. Sakura was normal, thank God. Speaking of Sakura, during their stay at Tezuna's, he had discussed with her the possibility of killing Gato. She had initially attempted to maintain a strong front but had soon collapsed. After letting her cry herself to tears, Obito gave her the same, "better them than you," speech he had given after his first kill. He focused on all the positive aspects of Gato's passing, which seemed to be helpful. He informed her that she would have a week to choose between retiring early and continuing to be a ninja. The offer had caused Sakura to become silent, and Obito reassured her that she wouldn't be under any pressure to decide until the end of the week. She'd thanked him and gone back to sleep. Obito waited for the barrier in front of the gates to open for them as they got closer to Konoha. Although Katetsu's excuse was sound and no one let you hear the end of it if you ran into the barrier, he was not above leaving it there to test your reflexes. Everyone knew he did it when he got bored. Fortunately, Obito was able to check in and they went through without any problems. Jonin Obito Uchiha and Genin Team 7 returning from a mission. Azumo took out the log and flipped through it without raising his eyes from his cards. He located the mission and glanced at it for a moment. "Back early, I see. Something go wrong?" Obito acknowledged, "We may have been a little too protective." Azumo gave Obito a quick glance before taking a second look at the weapons strapped to his team members' backs. "Sage, what did you guys do, raid an armory?" "Something like that." Katetsu put his cards down and said, "Well, welcome back, good job on not dying, kids," as his partner threw his own down and cursed. Before they left, Obito handed them a mission scroll, which he took out and stamped as completed. He waved them through the gates after tossing it to Obito. He said to Azumo, "Why don't we go on cool missions like that anymore?" as Team 7 departed. Azumo shuffled the cards and said, "Because you wanted to get promoted faster and thought swimming was a useless skill. So did you." As Obito reported the events of their mission, Minato sat at his desk and listened. Like the thousands of other mission reports he had heard during his time as Hokage, Minato allowed the words to pass over him. Even for something as low as a C-rank mission, the lowest rank that needed his attention, you discovered early on that most reports sounded the same during peacetime. Went out to complete the task, completed it, and received payment. He would only begin to listen to what was being said when there was a pause in the middle of a report or when a word like complications was used. Minato therefore began to pay attention when Obito used the phrase hostage situation while reporting on an escort and protection mission. After Obito finished his report, Minato recalled how much he detested maintaining appearances. He was suffering greatly from his new headache. The mission ought to have received at least a B-rank classification. Protecting a bridge builder from a small group of mercenaries was not the same as protecting a bridge builder from a large group of mercenaries under the command of 2 former samurai. He was only not charging Wave a fortune for risking his men for false information because they had already paid more than that and they generally had no problems with it. He would be checking Naruto later for bandages. The documents that were removed from Gado's safe by Obito. The documents contained the deeds to every company Gado had acquired in order to take over Wave Country, as well as all the equipment he required to operate his company. They had all of the following: finances, employee lists, customers, and dates. Konoha now controlled Gado's shipping company. They should be able to ship everything out to the daimyo and have him run the company for them, possibly even annexing Wave Country, but Minato needed the men in the village's financial division to review them. Naturally, the village would receive the majority of the revenue, but Fire Country could attract a larger clientele for their services if they grew. Minato waved Obito to remain behind while dismissing the genin. Then Minato gave the order to dismiss his Anbu guards. He desired a private conversation with his pupil. The guards left, and Obito said, "Hokage Sama." Obito relaxed as Minato arched a brow at him. "What's up, Minato Sensei?" "I wanted to hear your personal opinion on how Team 7 performed," Minato stated to him. "Some of the things in your report were a bit concerning." In jest, Obito said, "So, you weren't zoned out the whole time?" His smile vanished as he became solemn. "Naruto did fine, but he's still overestimating his abilities. Passing out on the docks could have gotten him killed and might have alerted everyone there to our presence if he had been discovered. He's still too reckless in a fight too. He got pretty cut up fighting the samurai and he should have known to fall back with me when I passed him, but he stood his ground instead." Minato moaned, He gets that from his mother. I'll have her talk to him about it. I'll go over it with the whole team as well. I'm having them take a break from missions to cool down and train for about a week. The same amount of time for Sakura to come to a final decision," said Minato. "Nothing could be gotten past his sensei. Yeah. I figured it would be better to see if we'll need to start pulling in free genin before working on a bunch of teamwork building exercises again." Minato questioned, "What do you think she'll do?" He wanted to know Obito's opinion of his son's teammate. "I'm not sure. Her family history says that she'll be more inclined to quit, but she's really taken to being a ninja. Her only friends are ninja and she's already getting committed to the lifestyle. Ultimately, I want to say she'll stay." Obito was also hopeful that she would remain. As Sakura gained more experience, she would become a skilled kunoichi. "There is one concern I have though." Minato was right to guess the circumstances of her first kill. "Yeah, she shot Gado from a distance and didn't even see him die. I told her what happened and she was stunned just from that. She hadn't even seen it confirmed for herself. I talked to her later and she ended up bursting into tears. If she's like that just at the idea of having killed someone, I'm not sure how well she'll take killing someone up close." Obito ran his hand through his hair in rage. "I'd like to believe that she'll be strong enough and I want her to be. I'm just not sure. What should I do, sensei?" Minato could see Obito's nervous expression. He was familiar with it from his days as Obito's sensei. He struggled with whether or not to expose his students to the brutality of ninja life without damaging them. It was a unique feeling to want to protect your student and put bubble wrap around them while also wanting to help them grow. His advice didn't seem to impress Obito, but it was all he had. "There's no real answer, Obito. It will all depend on Sakura's will. I'm sure you'll find a way. There were some things you simply had to figure out on your own. Now, about Sasuke." Obito said bluntly, "Yeah. He needs help," with a slight grimace. Sasuke torched an army of mercenaries by himself and found out why Logia Eaters are known as one-man armies. It was traumatizing to say the least. "Understandable," Minato said, his own grimace barely concealed. He recalled the moment he realized the full power of a Logia. Luckily, he had been in the midst of a war and had eaten his fruit well into his shinobi career. It was difficult to have it happen during your first C-rank mission. "I'm planning on informing Chief Fugaku and Mikoto tonight and recommending that they send him in for consoling." "No need. I'll talk to him." Obito yelled in surprise, "That's fine too, I guess." "Wait. What?" It takes a moment for Minato's words to fully register. You'll take care of his consoling? Obito exhaled a sigh of relief. No, that'd be ridiculous. He must have heard incorrectly. I'll just talk to him about his devil fruit. He should still see consoling. As he considered Minato's offer, Obito had a puzzled look on his face. Are you sure, sir? I know that you don't like to talk about your first time. Minato was hailed as a hero throughout Konoha and the Fire Country for his actions during the Third Shinobi War, but when asked what had earned him the titles of hero and the Yellow Flash, he refused to discuss it. He was trying to find a delicate way to say this. Kushina was the only one who had told Obito the story. He never mentioned it again. Minato gave Obito a little smile and said, I'm sure. I know what he's going through better than anyone else in the village. Besides, Minato said, I would be a horrible friend to Fugaku if I didn't. In addition, Inoichi was constantly criticizing him for discussing it. Perhaps this would make him stop talking. Obito said, Thank you, sensei. Anytime, Obito. It is the Hokage's job to protect the next generation. He waved him off. Now, get out of here. You need to prepare for the party later. Party? Minato whistled for his guards and returned to his paperwork, saying, We're celebrating Naruto and Sasuke's first successful C-rank mission. Talk to Rin, she's probably got everything taken care of already. Obito hurried out of the room to go home. Before they left for the party, he was excited to see his wife once more and catch up. Namikaze House. Only the families of Team 7 attended the party, which was a relatively small gathering. At first, it had been a little awkward. It was a start. Sakura's parents had felt uncomfortable and had persisted in referring to Minato as Hokage Sama, until he managed to reduce them to simply Minato-san. Before dinner was served, the adults had mixed a little. Sasuke then introduced Sakura to Itachi, and despite Sasuke's protests that he and Itachi already knew where everything was, Naruto gave them all a tour of the house. Sakura had begun as awkwardly as her parents, but after meeting the parents of everyone else, she soon relaxed and resumed her normal behavior. The adults had a few drinks after dinner while the children played outside. Excusing himself, Minato went to check on their activities. Minato discovered them playing a game of ninja tag with Itachi serving as the referee. When they saw him, they ceased their game. Naruto said, Hey, Dad. What's up? I just came to borrow Sasuke for a bit. Sorry to interrupt your game, replied Minato. Each of the younger ninja exchanged a questioning glance and a shrug. Sasuke approached Minato and guided him to the opposite side of the house, out of sight. Minato motioned for Sasuke to take the chair next to him as he sat down. It's scary considering how much power you have, isn't it? He said after a pause. Sasuke flinched without even trying to hide it. After a little more silence, he finally said, Yeah. You never really think about it. You're always told that Logias are the strongest devil fruit users in the world, but that doesn't really cover it. Eating a Logia fruit automatically makes you one of the strongest ninja in the world. Sure, there's thousands that are more skilled than you, but most of them can't get stabbed in the face and come out without a scratch. Minato looked at Sasuke and gave him an expression. It's a terrible burden, isn't it? The youngest heir of the Uchiha family swallowed hard. His hands were trembling as he looked down at them. How do you handle this much power? I killed so many people. And it was easy. It was like picking up a kunai. I'm terrified. Terrified of what I can do, what I've always been able to do and never knew. Sasuke watched Minato anxiously as he fell silent once more. He needed an answer badly. He had been tormented by it the whole way back from Wave. Someone his age shouldn't have to deal with this. Did Itachi choose a different fruit for this reason? Was his 7-year-old understanding of the weight of power superior to Sasuke's 12-year-old understanding? I ate the Pika. Pika no Mi during the Third Shinobi War. Minato began to tell Sasuke his tale. My squad had been pinned down by an ambush while scouting out Iwa's borders. One of my men was dead, the other was mortally wounded, and the third had lost a leg. I was the only one fit for combat and they had reinforcements coming in. We held out for a while, but that changed when the reinforcements arrived. They weren't a second squad, it was an entire army. Iwa was planning on making a big push against our forces and it was going to work. We were out of options and pretty much guaranteed to die. In my bag was a devil fruit I had been carrying around for weeks. I hadn't been able to decide whether to eat it or not. Laughed, I figured, why the hell not? We were dead anyways. That was the worst thing I've tasted in my life. It didn't make me feel any different. I had no idea what power I had gotten. It was supposed to take your entire life to learn how to master a devil fruit and I had seconds. I just peeked out of cover and held my hands out while willing something to happen. And it did. Later, my squad mate told me I shot a bunch of beams of light out of my hands and they created explosions that took out the whole army. That's how I got my moniker, not because I traveled around in a flash of yellow light, but because that was the last thing those soldiers saw before they died. A flash of yellow light. Minato inhaled deeply and gathered his thoughts. With a single, desperate act, I turned the tide of the entire war and basically won it for Konoha. They called me a hero, but, for the first time in years, I felt like a mass murderer. There's no easy way around it and that still haunts me to this day. But when I think of all the people I saved, how many Konoha ninja were still alive because of what I did, I can live with it. Minato looked Sasuke in the eyes and did best to express all of his convictions to the youngster. That's the key, Sasuke. We're people of mass destruction, there's no way around it, but that's not all we are. We're human. We've got people we care about, people we'd do anything for. Always remember, you're not just killing people, you're saving the ones you care about. Your team is alive and unharmed because you killed those men, and in the end, that's all that really matters. Focus on who you save, not who you kill. Sasuke remained quiet for a few minutes. He then got to his feet and bowed to Minato. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Hey, now. None of that. I'm not wearing the hat now. Stick with Minato-san at least, said Minato. Sasuke turned to go after nodding and bowing once more. Minato called out to him before he was out of earshot. Sasuke, in terms of raw power, you're one of the strongest ninja in the village right now. It's a terrible burden to put on one so young, but it is a burden I believe you can handle. After giving Minato one of his rare smiles, the Uchiha returned to the game. Minato grinned sadly as he watched him leave and stood up. It was about time he had a drink with some friends.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.